The intriguing aspect about Mars is that if it harbors life, it is likely that life exists universally. That is what motivates astronomers. Mars is often referred to as the quintessential planet. The temperature is moderate. It possesses abundant water and a safeguarding atmosphere. It is steadied in its orbit by a substantial moon and shielded from excessive debris by a robust sentinel, Jupiter. Welcome to our planet Earth, the sole known location harboring life. All our knowledge regarding the universe cautions us against presuming our uniqueness. The ongoing Copernican revolution has disclosed that our star is among billions of stars in the Milky Way. The process of stellar formation inherently results in the creation of terrestrial planets. Water and carbon are ubiquitous throughout the universe. Nevertheless, many characteristics of Earth render it especially conducive to biological life and the development of big, intricate species. This has resulted in the rare Earth hypothesis, which posits that microscopic life may be ubiquitous in the universe, whereas sophisticated life is remarkably scarce. Is the Earth truly optimal? Or are we merely engaging in one of Kipling's just so stories, fabricating an intricate narrative of our origins and thereafter convincing ourselves that it could not have unfolded differently? The Earth is so fertile that we presume it is the sole habitable location in the solar system. However, 3 billion years ago, Venus and Mars exhibited temperate and moist conditions, potentially supporting primordial life forms. Mars perpetually fascinates the public. It presents a dichotomy, arid and dust-laden, yet suggesting the presence of recent liquid water. Robotic probes have explored Mars multiple times in recent years, and a small fleet is being prepared to investigate the planet for indications of life. The ultimate objective is a human-crewed mission to retrieve samples. Still, even the wealthiest nation hesitates at the associated costs, making a robotic sample return mission likely to precede it. Venus and Mars reside within or adjacent to the conventional habitable zone, a limited range of distances from a star where a planet can sustain liquid water on its surface. However, two of the most promising locations for potential life, or at least for insights into prebiotic chemistry, are situated in the distant regions of the gas giants. Jupiter's moon, Europa, possesses a fractured ice crust that conceals an ocean whose depths may be maintained at a temperate state by geothermal heat emanating. Assuming the diversity of extremophiles on Earth serves as a reference, there are 5 conceivable habitats for current or former life within our solar system. Life may exist on rocky planets in proximity to a star or on substantial moons, heated by radioactivity or tidal forces. Up to 12 minor celestial bodies in the outer solar system might possess the fundamental components for life: water, an energy source, and organic compounds. Life is not necessarily dependent on a star. The quest for evidence of life within the solar system underscores the profound reality of outer space's enormity. The sheer scale of the cosmos is indeed daunting. Why is it so challenging to retrieve a Martian rock? While space exploration incurs substantial costs, after 5 decades of geopolitical competition, the private sector is now poised to take a leading role in this endeavor. This entrepreneurial fervor may soon catalyze innovative forms of exploration, potentially encompassing interstellar travel. Exploring the solar system for signs of life requires determination and foresight. While the established spectrum of terrestrial life can inform our search, we must not be constrained by it. Although Earth requires our urgent focus, adjacent celestial bodies provide the potential to enlighten us about our origins. In future, when 100 years pass and we learn how to build small robotic space probes, a legion of them is launched from Earth orbit at half the speed of light. They're each programmed to travel to a different long-lived star like the Sun and home in on its most Earth-like planet. The project is called Artemis, after the twin sister of Apollo. as Artemis rode her silver chariot across the sky and shot arrows of moonlight to the Earth below. So these 5,000 metallic voyagers travel far and send their signals home. Each probe descends on a one-way trip to an alien world, collecting images up to the moment of impact. The architects of this project have a flair for drama. They resist the temptation to present the data on each new planet as it trickles in. Instead, they collect the signals with an orbiting satellite dish and wait until the probes reach their different destinations and the first 1,000 results are ready to beam to Earth. Humans have waited millennia to find out if they're alone. Another decade makes no difference. Projection TV banks are established in urban centers globally, enabling the public to view all channels concurrently. The Artemis website features a counter that increments the tally of examined terrestrial planets. 991, 992. The pivotal number nears, and spectators start to assemble. No one, not even the project engineers, has witnessed any of the footage. The screens all illuminate simultaneously. What is being revealed? Are there 1,000 desolate worlds marked by craters and volcanoes? Numerous aquatic planets, their landmasses verdant with flora? Varied terrains obscured by dense and noxious atmospheres? How many of these worlds are sufficiently recognizable to be our relatives? As each display focuses on a surface, what do the silent masses on Earth perceive? How many of the myriad screens depict the exhilarating evidence of landscapes molded by civilization? And how many, just before impact, reveal beings gazing upwards at the descending visitor from the sky? Were the Earth devoid of characteristics conducive to the emergence of intelligent life, our existence to contemplate such matters would be impossible. Consequently, we cannot derive extensive conclusions from the nature of our planet. Furthermore, our understanding of terrestrial planets is insufficient to extrapolate the conditions of our specific planet. Additionally, it is posited that the Earth harbors unique attributes and a distinct history that have enabled the evolution of large and intricate life forms. Should this combination of factors be rare, we might be singular in the universe. Peter Ward and Don Brownlee have formulated the provocative rare Earth hypothesis, which draws a clear distinction between microbial life and more complex multicellular and intelligent organisms. They posit that microbial life is plentiful, as organic materials and planets are ubiquitous, and that life on Earth originated rapidly and proliferated extensively. Conversely, they assert that advanced, multicellular, and intelligent life forms are uncommon, positing that extraordinary conditions are necessary for the emergence of intelligence. The existence of intelligent life in the universe holds considerable significance for many, including scientists. Extraterrestrial entities pose no threat to us, except in our nightmares. However, if the cosmos is populated with sentient beings, the fate and unique position of humanity come into question. We have endured 4 billion years of evolution, transitioning from primordial life forms to advanced, bipedal beings. Now that we have acquired a new mode of transportation, we seek recognition. Ward is a geologist, while Brownlee is a planetary scientist. Both are employed in neighboring buildings at the University of Washington, yet their work is markedly different. Ward is slender and energetic, an enthusiastic diver who required hip replacement surgery due to excessive strain from basketball. Brownlee, older and paternal, possesses a calming Midwestern accent. He is perplexed by the uproar generated by their work and subsequent publication. What is the central concept? And why do they consider intelligent life to be an anomaly? Ward and Brownlee enumerate the essential factors that contribute to the emergence of advanced life forms. They contend that each factor is inherently uncommon and that all must coexist for the development of complex life and intelligence. Firstly, a substantial proximate moon is necessary to stabilize the climate by mitigating variations in axial tilt. Secondly, An impact environment that fosters biological diversity while preserving essential advantages is required. Furthermore, a planet of appropriate mass must be situated within the narrow habitable zone, accompanied by a larger Jupiter-like planet at a greater distance to shield it from excessive impacts. The presence of plate tectonics and liquid water on Earth is imperative. Finally, the host star must possess a sufficient abundance of heavy elements for planetary formation at its inception. It must be located in a galactic region where stellar activity does not obliterate life. This is a formidable array of prerequisites. Nevertheless, with further scrutiny, each element possesses a corresponding counter-argument. The fundamental premise of rare Earth is that all these conditions must be satisfied to enable intelligent life. The perilous environment serves as a pertinent illustration. The Earth's impact rate would be elevated without Jupiter in its present location. Nonetheless, there exist plausible configurations that could yield a diminished impact rate for a terrestrial planet. The Moon originated from a cataclysmic collision, yet it contributes to the stabilization of Earth's axial tilt and, by extension, its climate. Simulations suggest that impacts often lead to the formation of substantial moons. Even in the absence of a moon, a planet can sustain habitability if it experiences slight tilting or gradual wobbling. It has been observed that impacts or radiation events can catalyze evolution by clearing ecological niches and enhancing genetic diversity. Is there an optimal impact rate for a planet capable of supporting life? If such a rate exists, there is no evidence to suggest that Earth's circumstances are optimal. The concept of a habitable zone refers to an environment that is conducive to life. The conventional habitable zone refers to the distance range from a star where water can exist in liquid form on the surface of a terrestrial planet, underscoring the necessity of surface water for life. The majority of the universe is frigid, dark, and devoid of life. At considerable distances from a star, temperatures plummet to the point where air freezes. Conversely, proximity to a star results in the boiling of flesh and metal. We are gathered around our campfire, the sun, and we postulate that life elsewhere must similarly exist near a source of heat. The habitable zone in our solar system ranges from 0.7 to 1.3 times the average Earth-Sun distance, measured in astronomical units, AU, and encompasses solely Earth. Nevertheless, the Sun's luminosity was lower in the past, and the former habitable zone would have subjected Earth to severe cold without the mitigating effects of greenhouse gases. Habitable zones are transient and must be characterized by both temporal and spatial parameters. The Sun is expected to endure for an additional 4 billion years, after which it will deplete its hydrogen reserves in a series of intermittent eruptions. The initiation of helium fusion will transform it into a red giant. As its outer layers expand by a factor of 100, it will consume the Earth, incinerating all life. However, before this event, the gradual increase in the Sun's luminosity will lead to the evaporation of the oceans, rendering Earth a desolate wasteland. This scenario affords approximately 500 million years, sufficient time for our descendants to achieve autonomy from our star. We are currently far from achieving this goal. Our reliance on fossil fuels positions us more akin to hunter-gatherers than to prospective space explorers. We have gained control over nuclear fusion, an effortless process for stars, yet at exorbitant costs and for mere fractions of a second. The Sun is frequently characterized as a typical star, which holds in a general context, but not in a numerical sense. 95% of all stars possess a lower mass than the Sun, resulting in smaller sizes, diminished luminosity, and correspondingly reduced habitable zones. Jim Casting of Penn State, recognized as the foremost authority on habitable zones, has extensively analyzed this concept. His calculations account for the feedback effects of greenhouse gases within a typical terrestrial planet atmosphere, which modulate temperature and slightly expand the habitable zone. Examining the relatively uncommon stars that exceed the Sun's mass, there is a diminished time frame for the emergence of life, and the habitable zone extends to a distance where terrestrial planets are improbable. A star with half the Sun's mass has a lifespan of merely 3 billion years, with the inner boundary of the habitable zone situated just beyond the orbit of Mars. Conversely, a star 4 times more massive than the Sun exists for only 400 million years, with its habitable zone commencing near Jupiter's orbit. A planet located at an Earth-like distance from such a star would be unable to sustain oceans, as they would evaporate. At a particular juncture, when contemplating more massive stars, we postulate that the duration for biological evolution diminishes to the extent that it concludes prematurely before the emergence of anything noteworthy. Nevertheless, this hypothesis lacks empirical support or theoretical foundation. Evolution on Earth has occurred in sporadic phases, and we remain uncertain regarding the time required to cultivate complex life under alternative physical conditions. For the more prevalent low-mass stars, a distinct challenge arises. Temporal longevity is not a concern. A star with half the Sun's mass can endure for 50 billion years. However, the outer boundary of the habitable zone is situated within the orbit of Venus. A star with 1/4 of the Sun's mass emits a faint luminosity, merely 1/100th of the Sun's brightness. The habitable zone of such a red dwarf constitutes a narrow region closely orbiting the dim star. A planet must reside no more than a few million miles away to maintain liquid water. A star of excessive mass will have a brief lifespan and possess a habitable zone situated beyond the rocky planets of our solar system. Conversely, a star of insufficient mass allows ample time for biological development to occur. Nonetheless, terrestrial planets must exist within a narrow habitable zone, enduring extreme climatic conditions due to tidal locking with the star. Consequently, astronomers have concentrated their search for exoplanets on stars analogous to the Sun. We have postulated that Earth-like planets are exclusively formed at Earth-like distances from their respective stars, as evidenced by our solar system. The potential formation distances of terrestrial planets around other stars remain unknown due to the limited number of discoveries. Our assumptions include nearly circular orbits. However, if eccentric orbits predominate, planets may oscillate in and out of their habitable zones, resulting in significant climatic fluctuations over months or years. We have also presumed the existence of single stars, yet the majority of stars exist within binary systems. In cases of wide separation, planets may behave as if the companion star is non-existent. Conversely, close binaries exhibit unstable orbits, which would render the conditions for life exceptionally intriguing. It is advantageous to diminish the hold of stellar chauvinism. Extremophiles on Earth demonstrate that life can thrive above the boiling point and below the freezing point of water, deep within rock, and in the absence of light beneath the ocean. The energy source for life may derive from geothermal energy on a sufficiently large planet or tidal heating of a moon orbiting a planet. Planets can be expelled from their solar systems due to gravitational interactions. Those sufficiently massive to produce internal energy, yet possessing atmospheres that are not excessively thick and oppressive, may indeed support life. We are differentiating between an animal habitable zone and a microbial habitable zone. If Earth biology serves as a reference, microbial habitable zones may extend from the proximity of a white dwarf to the depths of interstellar space. The rare Earth hypothesis suggests that larger and more complex life forms require a longer evolutionary time frame. Animal habitable zones are less common than those capable of supporting microbial life. The question is, To what extent are they rarer? Advocates for rare earth and numerous biologists are astonished that it required 2.5 billion years for advanced animals to emerge. They contend that if this process had taken 3 times longer, the sun would have extinguished before the advent of tools and toasters. Conversely, NASA planetary scientist Chris McKay posits that human-like intelligence could arise in as little as 100 million years under different yet plausible conditions. Instead of being the most intelligent entities, we may be those who take the longest to ascend to the pinnacle of intelligence. Larger animals possess greater energy demands and exhibit diminished resilience to substantial environmental alterations. Furthermore, only a minuscule fraction of species exhibit intelligence. On Earth, 1 billion years after the initial emergence of animals and 500 million years after the development of primitive brain structures. Are high-functioning animals so exceedingly rare that we are effectively solitary within the expansive Milky Way? Although intelligence may not be an inevitable outcome, there exists an evolutionary rationale for the trajectory that has culminated in this juncture. The pivotal advancement was the inception of the first cell, which activated the processes of genetic diversification and natural selection, wherein the traits of the collective, the species, are dictated by the fitness of the individual, the organism, within a specific environment. This constitutes a compelling motif in biology, the resonant base. On Earth, function and form evolved concurrently. Cooperation facilitated specialization, which subsequently engendered complexity. Prokaryotes, eukaryotes, and multicellular organisms, each phase seamlessly transitioned into the next. The perpetual evolutionary arms race led to the development of enhanced sensory capabilities, necessitating the evolution of larger brains to process the resulting information. Ultimately, nature, inadvertently, gave rise to existential angst. Indeed, the rare earth argument is fundamentally flawed due to its circular reasoning and tautological nature. It is circular because life has significantly transformed the ecosystem, and numerous remarkable characteristics of our planet's atmosphere and geology have emerged as a result of life. It is tautological since we can only observe the trajectory of complexity on a single planet. Evolution could unfold in markedly different ways on Earth's distant counterparts. Furthermore, some aspects of the rare earth checklist are interdependent, thereby diminishing the perceived uniqueness of our planet. Ultimately, we possess inadequate information regarding planetary diversity and the trajectories of life to render a well-informed judgment. Nevertheless, the proposition has stimulated a constructive discourse on the essential and sufficient conditions for complex biology. Concurrently, while Earth is indisputably unique, there exist proximate locations that can enhance our understanding of life. Millennia before our understanding of their true essence as celestial bodies, the nocturnal wanderers captivated our imaginations. The 5 visible planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, are intricately woven into mythology and astrology, with their names influencing the nomenclature of the days of the week in Romance languages. Among these symbols, Mars holds the most significant potency. In ancient Babylon, he was Nergal, the deity of war, the searing midday sun, and the harbinger of plague, epidemics, and calamity. In his quest for power, he compelled the queen of the underworld to share her realm with him. In Hindu scriptures, he was Kartikeya, conceived to fulfill a prophecy. A demon plagued the gods, prompting them to persuade the great ascetic Shiva to sire a child by conjuring the illusion of a wonderful woman, which caused Shiva to ejaculate upon seeing her. His fiery sperm was nurtured by the wives of the 7 stars of the Big Dipper. 7 days later, Kartikeya was born and, as the god of war, vanquished the demon. Millennia later, he was known as Ares to the Greeks, a brutal and malevolent deity who reveled in warfare. His progenitors despised him, and his sister Athene labeled him a creature of fury, composed of malevolence, a duplicitous deceiver. The Greeks declined to venerate this bloodied coward. No hallowed sites were erected in his honor. He was commemorated solely on the battlegrounds, where he inflicted suffering and demise, accompanied by his attendants, Phobos and Deimos, fear and panic. Everything he influenced was tainted by his nature. He wed the gentle nymph Harmony, but sired with her the Amazons, a fierce tribe of women. The Romans followed the Greek lead, and so he became Mars, their god of war. The third month in our calendar was named after him because it was the time of year when the Romans readied their legions for battle. To the Norse of that era, he was the god of battle, Tyr, a one-armed man. The Goths sacrificed their captives and hung the arms of the victims in trees as a token offering. In Old English, his name was Tew, given to the second day of our week. How could a pale red dot in the night sky become the incarnation of bloodlust and a symbol of violent sexual energy through the ages? As Joseph Campbell said, myths are a culture's dreams. They provide metaphors for our internal struggles and rites of passage, as well as how we transmit our collective experience. Our technology bubble means we've lost touch with nature and the sky. Perhaps we've also lost touch with a part of ourselves. Campbell followed Carl Jung by recognizing the power of archetypes as the clearest manifestations of the swirl of dreams, fears, and longings in our unconscious. Mars is associated with aggressive forms of masculinity. But more than that, it's the planet that mirrors our weaknesses, our insecurities, and our rage. Mars is the archetype that must be faced if humans are ever to fulfill their magnificent promise as a species. On the evening of October 31st, 1938, the New York region witnessed remarkable episodes of panic and mass hysteria. Families abandoned their residences and congregated in adjacent parks. Individuals were weeping in churches. Thoroughfares were congested with traffic, and telephone lines became inoperative. In a single city block in Newark, over 20 families hastily exited their homes, their damp towels draped over their heads, fearing a gas attack. Others packed their belongings into trucks, and shortly prior, a dance music program on the radio was interrupted by a news flash detailing a series of gas explosions on Mars. In the subsequent half hour, correspondents on site reported a meteor landing near Princeton, New Jersey, resulting in 1,500 fatalities, and revealed that the meteor was a metallic cylinder that released bizarre Martian creatures equipped with death rays. On Halloween night, New York and New Jersey faced no peril. The chaos may have been intensified by foreboding reports from Europe, where the specter of war loomed. Orson Welles, the producer of the radio play, undoubtedly amplified the hysteria with his expertise. However, the roots of fear had long been embedded in our subconscious, solidified decades earlier by the notion of a Martian civilization. Percival Lowell exerted considerable pressure on his construction team. They labored in the thin air, working overtime to pour cement and assemble an iron frame. Lowell, an aristocrat from Boston who amassed his wealth through commerce, harbored a fervent interest in Mars. He was racing to finalize a 24-inch telescope on a high plateau in northern Arizona before Mars's closest approach to Earth in 15 years. By 1894, he was conducting observations with his new telescope every clear night, meticulously documenting the peculiar linear markings, or canals, in his notebook. Lowell fell prey to the influence of suggestion and optimistic speculation. He believed that a declining civilization constructed the canals to transport water from the frigid poles to the equatorial zones. In his book, titled Mars, he stated, "Without seas and mountains, life would tend the quicker to reach a highly organized stage. Thus, Martian conditions make for intelligence." However, by the subsequent approach of Mars, others had conducted more advanced observations and did not perceive what Lowell had observed. Alfred Russel Wallace, who concurrently formulated the theory of evolution alongside Charles Darwin, assessed the evidence and asserted, "Not only is Mars devoid of intelligent life, as Mr. Lowell suggests, it is uninhabitable." Since that time, Mars has remained a fixture in the collective imagination, inspiring classic science fiction by authors such as Ray Bradbury and Robert Heinlein, as well as serving as a source of material for television programs and films from time to time. No other location has incited as intense curiosity over extraterrestrial life. Who was correct, Lowell or Wallace? Nicole's alarm clock activates 40 minutes later each day. This morning, she meets her two roommates in the kitchen. They endeavor to avoid obstructing one another while microwaving coffee, pouring cereal, and retrieving yogurt from the refrigerator. Sarah is en route to French class. Ingrid possesses a biochemical laboratory. Nicole Spanovich proceeds to the basement of a building next to the University of Arizona campus, where a remote operations center for the Mars exploration rovers is located. Nicole's alarm clock is distinctive as it operates on Martian time. The Opportunity and Spirit rovers traversed extensive distances from their landing sites, providing the audience with the exhilarating experience of observing a vehicle navigate a remote planet, maneuvering over rocks and ascending into craters. Few individuals could have realized that the individual issuing commands to the rovers was an undergraduate student. Spanovich plays a pivotal role in the 800 Million Initiative, orchestrating the presentation of mission status and directing data to the scientific teams. The timetable is unyielding. We must promptly analyze the daily data to determine the optimal destination for the rovers. Soon, Spanovich will rise at midnight for her work, prompting her to chuckle wryly when a flatmate laments about her 8 a.m. schedule. C equals C. We are currently engaged in a thrilling period of Martian exploration. Over the last decade, robots have been exploring the surface, while satellites have been conducting orbital mapping. 3 decades prior, when the inaugural Viking lander descended from a dusty peach-hued sky onto a rough Martian plain, it appeared to dispel a century of fantastical notions. Wallace was correct. Mars appeared desolate, arid, and lifeless. We are currently uncertain. Nonetheless, Lowell was incorrect as well. Viking's biological studies failed to identify any unequivocal evidence of life. The reality is enticingly ambiguous. Let us examine the knowledge acquired about Mars in recent years and the anticipated discoveries from the forthcoming fleet of spacecraft in development. Bear in mind that Mars continues to challenge our nascent space program to its fullest extent. Billions of dollars worth of hardware designed for Mars has either gone missing, malfunctioned, or crash-landed. Ed Weiler, the assistant administrator of NASA, famously stated, "Mars has been an exceedingly challenging destination. Some, myself included, have referred to it as the planet of demise." What is the rationale behind that statement? Approximately 2/3 of all missions conducted to Mars have been unsuccessful. Reaching Mars presents considerable challenges, but the complexities of landing are even greater. Mars exhibits a stark contrast to Earth, both in orbital view and surface characteristics. The expansive Tharsis Plateau separates the smooth, relatively uncratered northern lowlands from the heavily cratered southern highlands. The western extremity of the plateau is home to Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in the solar system. At the same time, the eastern section transitions into Valles Marineris, a vast canyon system that eclipses the Grand Canyon in scale. The planet is strewn with colossal volcanoes. However, their distribution does not conform to patterns indicative of plate tectonics. Mars is geologically inert. A significant revelation regarding Mars is the presence of water, not currently, but in both the distant and possibly recent past, in abundant quantities. Mars glimmers like a mirage. with water appearing so near that it is nearly tangible. In June 2000, NASA convened a press conference to unveil images from the Mars Global Surveyor. Due to extensive media speculation and leaked information, the event was rescheduled to an earlier date. The findings were remarkable. Mars exhibits numerous sites with gullies and runoff channels. Liquid, likely water, had been emanating from the ground and traversing the surface. Numerous structures emerged across dunes, which are transient due to aeolian processes. This indicated that the flowing water was geologically recent. The gullies reinforced the well-documented evidence of water on Mars in its ancient past. Vikings observed extensive valley networks in the planet's southern hemisphere. These valleys are predominantly situated in regions with numerous craters, some of which formed after the valleys, indicating their great antiquity, dating back approximately 3.5 to 4 billion years ago. They resemble Earth's river valleys, indicating that water was present for a significant duration. Glacial activity has also sculpted other geological features. For ice to exhibit movement, it must have existed under relatively warm conditions. Ice significantly below its melting point is brittle and incapable of flowing. Mars was warmer and wetter in its early history, suggesting a thicker atmosphere at that time. If Mars experienced higher temperatures in the past, the presence of seas and permanent water bodies becomes explicable. How can we rationalize the gullies where runoff may be occurring presently? For those inclined towards the Pritzing Rock, observe this phenomenon in real time. However, in late 2006, NASA disseminated images from the Mars Orbiter camera that depicted the resurfacing of a gully in photographs taken less than 4 years apart. This occurrence is not merely recent in geological terms. Water is continuously emerging. The deity of warfare has experienced a modulation of his harshness. It is widely acknowledged that life necessitates water. Previously, the perception of Mars as a cold, desolate wasteland diminished the likelihood of biological existence. Nevertheless, if Mars possessed a more temperate climate in its history or currently harbors subterranean water, the possibilities for life become intriguing once more. The Mars exploration rovers confirmed the presence of water on Mars, bringing attention to Nicole Spanovich. At 21, she commenced her role managing the Remote Operations Center for the Opportunity rover in Tucson. Even after a year, she experienced trepidation while transmitting commands across 100 million miles to the rover, observing its ascent over a crater's rim on a monitor. Similarly, Zoe Lerner joined JJPL's Mission Control for the Rover program as a full team member at the age of 22. The Net Generation, comprising individuals born in the 1990s, is well positioned to assume leadership roles. The future of space exploration lies in telepresence. Machines will serve as our sensory extensions on remote planets. Robots are an ideal option for space exploration due to their durability and the rapid progress in computing and electronics that will enhance their functionalities. Exploration of Mars will evolve into an experience akin to a video game. In early 2004, a spacecraft descended from the Martian atmosphere and inflated before landing on the surface. It rebounded to a height equivalent to a 4-story building and continued to bounce approximately 24 times before settling in a cloud of red dust. 19 days later, its counterpart landed similarly on the opposite side of the planet. The landing bags deflated, and 2 diminutive robots, each comparable in size to a go-kart, emerged from their landing platforms at a pace akin to an infant's. Twins invariably exhibit distinct personalities, and the same applies to the rovers. Opportunity is the risk-prone overachiever. It experienced fortuitous circumstances during its landing, veering off its intended trajectory, and ultimately resting at the base of a crater with rare exposed Martian bedrock. Opportunity commenced its analysis and swiftly uncovered chemical evidence indicating that the rocks in the outcrop had formed through evaporation in an aqueous environment. It discovered numerous small spheres, layering, and rocky fissures, all indicative of formation in water, yet inconsistent with a volcanic origin. Opportunity rewards the intrepid. A tumultuous Martian tempest removed the dust obscuring its solar panels, just as its power reserves were critically low. It previously became ensnared in sand and was liberated after weeks of exertion. It also suffers from a malfunctioning shoulder joint. Nonetheless, the early identification of geological evidence for flowing water has been a significant highlight of the mission. As Steve Squires, a Cornell professor and the principal scientist for the rovers, stated, "Opportunity uncovered the shoreline of a salty sea on Mars. However, definitive evidence may necessitate a sample return mission. This resilient rover has recently surpassed 10 kilometers on its odometer, nearly 20 times its intended design distance, all without the assistance of a mechanic or routine maintenance." Spirit, in contrast, is the industrious twin. It descended onto a monotonous expanse of basaltic lava, lacking the initial triumph of opportunity, yet subsequently ventured into foothills characterized by more intriguing geology. It ascended a hill, equivalent in height to the Statue of Liberty, but the diamond-tipped drill was depleted. When its front wheel began to bind, it diligently explored in reverse until the issue was resolved. Through Spirit's observations, over an entire cycle of Martian seasons, the scientific team has acquired a vivid understanding of the Martian environment. The audacious rovers have significantly altered Squires' existence. The mission initially proposed 90 Martian days of exploration per rover. Instead, they have exceeded 1,000 days. "We are far beyond their warranty," Squires concedes. He has limited his travel due to the necessity of meticulously planning each day's activities. "On one hand, we are fatigued," he states. "On the other hand, there is no exhilaration in science that rivals the excitement of discovery." He possesses minimal time to analyze the returned data or the 250,000 images. The schedule is unyielding, yet he desires its continuation. Exploration will never be complete. Whenever the rovers cease to function, whether tomorrow or 2 years hence, there will perpetually exist something magnificent and alluring just outside our grasp that we shall never attain. The Crimson Planet is replete with enigmas. Recent space missions provide 3 fundamental inquiries. Why did Mars desiccate? Might it have supported life during its wetter periods? And is it capable of sustaining life presently? Suppose Mars possessed sufficient warmth for surface water 4 billion years ago, when the sun was 25% less luminous than now. In that case, it must have had a carbon dioxide atmosphere dense enough to create a significant greenhouse effect. In early Mars, oceans, saline seas, and glaciers existed. Precipitation and erosion occurred, and the atmosphere was denser than it is currently. The weak gravitational force of Mars permitted a portion of carbon dioxide to dissipate into space. The remainder dissolved in the waters and was integrated into rocks. Due to the absence of plate tectonics on Mars, there was no mechanism to recycle carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, resulting in its gradual dissipation along with the associated greenhouse warming. What was the volume of water on Mars, and what is its current location? Mars acquired its water like Earth, through a combination of tiny asteroids and comets. This indicates that Mars originally possessed water amounting to approximately 10% of Earth's oceans, or a layer nearly half a mile deep covering the entire surface. The substantial volume of water aligns with erosion characteristics and the indications of prehistoric oceans. The majority of the water dissipated into space. However, meticulous estimates indicate that 10% persists in an irregularly distributed permafrost, which contains a layer of liquid water of indeterminate thickness beneath it. The Mars Express mission identified a sea of pack ice obscured by volcanic ash, situated distantly from the Martian poles, with ice occasionally seen in clear sight. Historically, Mars has the essential components for microbial life: heat, water, carbon, and a stable climate. Regrettably, the most extensively researched region of ancient Mars is engulfed in debate. The Allen Hills meteorite, ALH 84001, is roughly 4.5 billion years old, originating from the primordial period of the Martian crust. It endured for aeons until a meteor collision propelled it away. After traversing space for almost 10 million years, it descended in Antarctica 13,000 years ago. The evidence indicating that the meteorite originated from Mars is persuasive. Minute air bubbles encapsulated in the rock precisely correspond to the atmospheric concentrations recorded by Viking, and they diverge from the ratios of the same isotopes present on Earth. In 1996, ALH 84001 garnered significant attention when a team led by David McKay at NASA's Johnson Space Center asserted it showed signs of primordial life. The 36 identified Martian meteorites present both advantages and disadvantages. They circumvent the expenses associated with a sample return expedition, yet their origins remain ambiguous. Furthermore, they have endured a forceful expulsion from the Martian surface, an extensive journey through the inhospitable conditions of space, and a phase during which terrestrial contamination could permeate. There is a constraint on the knowledge we can acquire from these atypical rocks. Multiple lines of evidence indicated the presence of life in ALH 84001. Following its formation, the rock acquired carbonate globules, suggesting exposure to water. The meteorite comprised two substances, ring-shaped carbon molecules known as polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHUs, and magnetite crystals that are frequently, though not exclusively, linked to life activity on Earth. Ultimately, the scientists identified sausage-shaped structures that they contended were diminutive fossilized bacteria. The positive sentiment was evident, although the hedging and qualifications emerged rapidly. The discovery team subsequently concurred that the interior of ALH 84001 had not been devoid of contamination. Alternative parties contended that the majority of the meteorite's carbon originates from its period in Antarctica. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, are found in deep space, suggesting that they may have infiltrated terrestrial rock as cosmic dust over the past 4.5 billion years. The magnetite crystals constitute the most compelling evidence, exhibiting a characteristic hexagonal morphology comparable to that of the minerals seen in terrestrial microorganisms. Joe Kirschvink of Caltech has demonstrated that certain features of magnetite crystals are incompatible with a non-biological origin. The fossil evidence, paradoxically, is the least persuasive. The morphologies are indicative. Nevertheless, they lack cell walls and are significantly smaller than terrestrial bacteria, leading biologists to question their capacity to contain a viable quantity of genetic material. Comparable elongated shapes may have originated from crystal formation or molten spatter resulting from the impact that propelled the rock towards the Earth. This Mars rock garnered attention in 1995 due to its association with microfossils. Appearances may be misleading, yet formations of this nature are 10 to 20 times smaller than the smallest known terrestrial life and can be generated abiotically by crystal growth or impact spatter, rendering the Scottish verdict not proven. To acquire further knowledge, we require more than a mere collection of arbitrary rocks presented to us. It would not be surprising if Mars harbored microorganisms in its aqueous history. Nonetheless, it was likely never truly alive in the Gaia sense, as it exhibits none of the global modifications to its atmosphere and surface that are indicative of a fully established biosphere. Is Mars currently inhabited? We lack knowledge. The Mars exploration rovers were engineered to assess fundamental chemistry and investigate the surface in search of notable rocks. They were unable to determine the soil for biological activity. The Viking landers employed equipment that was a generation outdated, and the outcomes of their testing were persistently confusing. A scientist has posited that Vikings extinguished the life they sought to identify, as their tests were based on metabolic processes analogous to those of terrestrial life. The exploration of Mars is experiencing a significant transformation. For decades, NASA constructed extensive and intricate spacecraft at a cost of billions of dollars. Scientists would approach retirement before their visions produced a return on investment. In the 1970s, a group of hacker programmers from MIT presented NASA with a concept for a Mars expedition, utilizing a network of robotic ants interconnected by a neural network. But they were ridiculed and dismissed. The prevailing mantra is now, faster, better, cheaper. A federal agency with an annual budget of $17 billion cannot rapidly adapt, although it is endeavoring to respond to contemporary demands. The forthcoming mission will exhibit significantly greater technological sophistication than all prior Mars expeditions. They will focus on locations where evidence of water is most significant. The topsoil is sterilized using UV light, necessitating the probes to drill for samples and do biochemical analyses. Alan Wagoner is a biomedical engineer specializing in the development of fluorescent dyes that attach to DNA, lipids, carbohydrates, and proteins. Richard Mathies, a biophysicist at Berkeley, is refining a biology laboratory on a silicon chip that will identify amino acids with 1,000 times greater sensitivity than the Viking mission could achieve. Both researchers evaluate their methodologies in Chile's Atacama Desert, a desolate region that is 50 times drier than California's Death Valley. Initially, the dry run will occur, followed by the mission to Mars. A reconnaissance mission arrived on Mars in 2006. It is presently charting surface features to the scale of a dinner plate and employing a sonar to identify objects beneath the water. It has even observed the Mars rovers operating in challenging conditions. Phoenix is scheduled to arrive in 2008, landing near the northern pole. It will excavate several feet under the frozen surface and analyze soil samples using an oven and a mobile laboratory. The subsequent mission is the Mars Science Laboratory, anticipated to land in 2010. This 3-ton facility will include a collection of devices for chemical research and an enhanced rover capable of vaporizing rock samples using a laser. If Martians exist, they are likely becoming increasingly concerned. In the same year, Mars will receive its own telecommunications satellite, which will help expand the interplanetary internet. The prospect of sample return is highly coveted. However, even space visionaries hesitate at the associated costs. Deploying astronauts would incur an astonishing price of $150 to $200 billion. But utilizing robotic probes is a cost-effective alternative at $5 to $10 billion. In the late 1990s, NASA's plans included a launch in 2003, with sample return anticipated by 2008. Recent iterations indicate a launch no sooner than 2014, prompting astute observers to note that NASA is regressing. President Bush's Earth, Moon, and Mars project may expedite the timeline, as will the European Space Agency's proposal for a sample return rocket in 2011. A robust blend of collaboration and rivalry between the United States and Europe stimulates planetary exploration. Numerous individuals empathize with Agent Mulder from the television series The X-Files, who displayed a banner in his basement office proclaiming, "I want to believe." Mars has, before, shattered our aspirations and may do so once more. Lowell passed away believing in the existence of a Martian culture. A false identification of chlorophyll occurred in the 1950s, succeeded by ambiguous data from Viking 2 decades later. We must exercise patience and persistence. The resolution of the issue will depend solely on acquiring more comprehensive and superior data. Irrespective of the results of the biological studies, the next exploration will render Mars as familiar to us as the Moon. Upon the initial sample's return, we may encounter a loss of innocence. If Mars possesses recognizable biology, it will indicate that Earth is not singular. Should it possess microbial life with a genetic framework distinct from our own, it would constitute one of the most significant discoveries in the annals of science. The vision is significantly more ambitious. The complete alteration of the Earth to facilitate human habitation. The process of rendering another planet similar to Earth is termed terraforming. The fundamental issue is temperature. Mars maintains a constant temperature of -67 degrees Fahrenheit, -55 degrees Celsius, necessitating a method to increase its warmth. The apparent strategy is to initiate a runaway greenhouse effect by sublimating the carbon dioxide that is locked in the polar ice caps. However, Mars cannot expel its carbon dioxide without being subjected to warming. It represents a quintessential catch-22. An undergraduate from MIT, Margarita Marinova, presented a potential resolution to this deadlock. She is one of the remarkably young women leading Mars research. Chris McKay suggested employing synthetically produced perfluorocarbons, PFCs, to commence the warming process. Perfluorocarbons, PFCs, are highly potent greenhouse gases with significant longevity in the atmosphere. They do not impact biological creatures or the ozone layer. What is the duration of this task? Marinova conducted approximate calculations. 100 factories producing PFCs, each possessing the energy output of a standard nuclear reactor, would elevate the Martian temperature by 1 degree every 15 years. Utilizing evaporating carbon dioxide, it would require approximately 500 to 600 years to elevate the entire Earth above the freezing point of water. Heating might also be accomplished with a mirror the dimensions of Texas, directing light towards the South Pole. This may seem excessively ambitious, but the 200,000 tons of aluminium needed correspond to about 5 days of Earth's production. And extraction and fabrication could occur in space. An increase of even 9 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees Celsius, in the planet's temperature would cause carbon dioxide to evaporate, propelling Mars to the threshold of global warming. The perilous phenomena on Earth benefit those who terraform. This effort serves solely as preparation. Mars will have been transformed into a frigid counterpart of the Precambrian Earth, fit exclusively for the most resilient extremophiles. Indigenous flora and fauna could not endure in that environment. 2 additional significant advancements are necessary. The initial step is the establishment of a self-regulating anaerobic biosphere. Numerous prospective creatures exist for the initial colonization of Mars. A specific cyanobacterium, Croococcidiopsis, thrives under extreme conditions of cold, aridity, and salinity on Earth, frequently emerging as the sole survivor. The cyanobacterium matea possesses the ability to dissolve and penetrate rock, while fixing nitrogen and releasing carbon dioxide. Next, there is a well-known organism, Deinococcus radiodurans. We envision that Conan the bacterium would be the inaugural volunteer for a challenging task. Indigenous bacteria may be enhanced with genetically modified strains. The objective is to create a biosphere and emit sufficient oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide to elevate the atmospheric pressure from its present 0.7% of Earth's level to approximately 2 or 3% of Earth's sea level pressure. The subsequent step involves incorporating vegetation and improving the ambience to a breathable standard. Producing trillions of cubic meters of air is not a simple task. Numerous developments will transpire simultaneously. Water will erode landscapes and sculpt rivers. soil will commence formation, altering the surface, which presently consists of meteorite pulverized rock known as regolith. When Mars exhibits a novel and intricate array of biological, chemical cycles distinct from those on Earth, accurately predicting the prevailing conditions will be exceedingly challenging. Chris McKay posits that the initial phase may be accomplished in slightly over a century. However, the subsequent phase could need thousands or possibly tens of thousands of years. Terraformers frequently underestimate the expense and complexity of transporting these starter bacteria and plants from Earth. A compelling alternative is to construct a self-replicating oxygen production facility. The solitary 100-ton seed unit would generate oxygen by the thermal processing of rock, which comprises oxides of silicon, iron, calcium, titanium, and aluminium. It would utilize the metals extracted from that soil to fabricate duplicates of itself. A NASA research indicated that a facility consuming 1 megawatt of power and requiring 1 year for replication could produce a breathable environment within a few hundred years. Additionally, the network of factories would produce 1,000 trillion tons of refined metals and serve as a billion-megawatt distributed power source that is self-repairing and accessible for other industrial applications. Specific individuals are appalled at the concept of terraforming. Is Mars enveloped with genetically modified microorganisms? Is Mars enveloped by strip mining factories? It is masculine. It elevates geeks to the status of gods, remarked biologist Geneva Andreadis, who participated in a seminar organized by the Mars Society on the subject. Collaborating with a planet is preferable. Terraforming is a blunt instrument. To be equitable to the planetary engineers, numerous individuals have been contemplating the ethical ramifications for an extended period. McKay, the inaugural individual to employ terraforming in the headline of a published publication about 25 years ago, offered a framework of planetary ethics founded on 3 ideals. The initial concept is preservation, wherein people abstain from modifying the Earth or other celestial entities only due to their technological capabilities. The second principle is stewardship, wherein humans may utilize and modify natural systems judiciously to achieve optimal long-term benefits. The third concept is intrinsic worth, which posits that human utilization is not the definitive criterion of value. We have experienced the Earth, where life is interconnected, and modifying one element often results in unforeseen repercussions. Beyond Earth, we may determine that the regulations differ. Do we possess the right to terraform Mars if it is determined to be an uninhabited planet? If life on Mars is precariously sustained, is it permissible to cultivate it and allow it to evolve in novel directions? We should aspire to colonize or modify planets only as an endeavor of discovery and knowledge, rather than as a consequence of environmental degradation necessitating sanctuary or driven by a desire for dominance and control. Survival has always been an intrinsic aspect of life's design. If we must abandon our home to perpetuate the species, it is not contrary to nature. The universe is improbable to be filled with uncommon and fragile living forms, as there exists a substantial amount of barren and rocky terrain. Colonizing any location beyond Earth will signify a significant transformation, marking our coming of age within the Milky Way. The mythology is erroneous. Mars is the Roman deity of war. The red planet is named for fire, blood, iron, symbolizing hardness and masculinity. Venus, our closest neighbor and counterpart, is the deity of beauty. The Milky Twin is named for affection for malleable copper and femininity. This narrative has been intricately interlaced between astrology and alchemy for 2 millennia. Nonetheless, Mars is, in reality, a tranquil environment characterized by temperate conditions and minimal geological activity. Conversely, Venus is a hazardous and inhospitable environment. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. This serves as a fitting exhortation and caution for those seeking to investigate our closest planetary neighbor. During the 1960s, the reckless superpowers undertook missions, resulting in a series of failures. Venera 1, communication terminated. Mariner 1, launch unsuccessful. Sputnik 20, unsuccessful flyby. Sputnik 21, unsuccessful flyby. Venera 1964, unsuccessful launch. Zond 1, communication lost. Venera 2, communication terminated. Venera 3, communication terminated. Venera 1965, unsuccessful launch. In 1967, after 16 attempts, the Venera 4 probe became the first human-made artifact to reach another planet. Nevertheless, it crashed upon landing without transmitting any data. 3 years later, the tenacious Soviets successfully deployed Venera 7 onto the surface of Venus. It relayed data for precisely 23 minutes before ceasing to function, its circuits damaged beyond repair. We ought to have been more discerning. Dante elucidated the anticipated themes in the Divine Comedy. We approach Venus with benevolent intentions. Its celestial realm is merely 7 steps from paradise for those who performed virtuous acts out of love. Charon navigates our vessel through the atmosphere. We abandon the outcasts and those who squandered their existence. Upon reaching the ground, we have also traversed the pagans relegated to the realm of limbo. The surface is desolate. Minos has adjudicated condemned souls, and their spirits are eternally confined here. A tempest rages, and the passionate roam inside it, adrift, never to connect again. Cerberus, the 3-headed dog, compels gluttons to consume the noxious earth. The avaricious and the self-indulgent are maneuvering enormous boulders. Heretics are confined in fiery tombs, while blasphemers and sodomites endure a deluge of lava. The terrain is marked by geological fissures, utilized as enclosures for thieves, sorcerers, perjurers, hypocrites, panderers, seducers, alchemists, false prophets, and corrupt politicians. The temperature is sufficiently high everywhere to cause burns to skin and flesh. Adversity encounters you on the surface of Venus. The sun scarcely penetrates dense yellowish clouds. The overcast sky is marred by lightning and sulfuric acid precipitation. A carbon dioxide atmosphere exerts pressure 100 times greater than that of Earth. The temperature is sufficiently high for paper to combust and liquefy. The individual who named it after the goddess of love possessed a lamentable history of romantic connections. Venus and Mars exemplify the contrasting trajectories of potentially habitable planets. 3 billion years ago, when life was firmly established on Earth, Venus and Mars possessed more temperate climates. Extremophiles on Earth flourish in environments resembling those of Venus and Mars. However, Venus is a toxic inferno, while Mars is a desiccated wasteland. What caused Venus to fail as a candidate for life-supporting environments? And should it be excluded from the list of prospective habitable locations? Our malevolent counterpart is within 5% of Earth in both size and density. Venus possesses an equivalent reservoir of carbon dioxide to Earth. Still, on our planet, it is dissolved in seas and sequestered in geological formations, whereas on Venus it constitutes a dense, suffocating veil. Both planets exhibit geological activity. The primary distinction is water. Venus, not Earth, possesses merely 0.01% of Earth's water. 4 billion years ago, when the sun was less luminous, Venus received merely 40% more sunlight than Earth gets presently. Does this suffice to distinguish between Hades and Valhalla? Researchers believe this to be the case. The temperature indicator observed in numerous transcontinental aircraft reveals an exterior temperature of minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 30 degrees Celsius, at an altitude of 5 miles. In the upper atmosphere, the temperature decreases so swiftly that water freezes and becomes stuck in the region responsible for weather phenomena. Envision a 40% increase in sunlight. This would elevate surface temperatures by merely 18 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius. Nonetheless, it would augment the quantity of water vapor in the troposphere. The weather. Layer by a factor of 5. Water vapor functions as a greenhouse gas, thereby capturing additional radiation, which elevates temperature and then increases atmospheric water content, further exacerbating the and so forth. It constitutes a positive feedback loop. Elevated temperature water molecules can ascend further into the atmosphere, where they are dissociated by ultraviolet radiation into hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen escapes into space, while the oxygen becomes incorporated into the crust. This runaway process would evaporate the oceans within a few 100 million years, which is believed to have occurred on Venus. The situation deteriorates. As the surface temperature elevated and the oceans vaporized, rocks emitted carbon into the atmosphere, where it combined with residual oxygen from the water vapor to produce carbon dioxide, an additional greenhouse gas. In the absence of water to dissolve it, carbon dioxide accumulated, entrapping additional radiation and further elevating the temperature. This secondary runaway phenomenon is the quintessential manifestation of the greenhouse effect. The outcome, a temperature of 900 degrees Fahrenheit, 480 degrees Celsius. This leads us to the topic of global warming. The Earth's biosphere is delicate. Jim Casting's studies suggest that a 10% increase in the sun's light would trigger a runaway greenhouse effect. Life on Earth will not endure until the sun exhausts its fuel. But approximately 1 billion years prior, the sun will increase in brightness by 10%, causing the oceans to evaporate. If we are not vigilant, a similar occurrence could transpire imminently. All data indicates that the Earth is experiencing warming. However, whether this phenomenon is a result of natural climate change or anthropogenic action remains a subject of intense discussion. Venus serves as a stark reminder of the potential consequences of unchecked climate change. Venus is inhospitable. Nonetheless, is it possible that it harbors life? David Grinspoon, the curator of astrobiology at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, has urged his colleagues to seriously consider the concept of life in the clouds of Venus. Grinspoon is an iconoclast in various respects. He performs with a rock band and associates with UFO enthusiasts and purported alien abductees to gain insight into non-scientific belief systems that resonate within popular culture. He has drawn inspiration from his mentor, Carl Sagan, who possessed a whimsical and intriguing approach to science. Grinspoon does not propose a particular organism that could endure the extreme heat of Venus. He is cognizant of terrestrial extremophiles capable of enduring similarly hazardous conditions. He understands that Venus is subjected to energy input from ultraviolet radiation, which features a complex chemistry that links the atmosphere to the surface. He asserts that life is a process, and Venus exhibits significant geological activity and energy flow in its atmosphere, which facilitates numerous processes. Existence there would be peculiar, as Venus differs fundamentally from any location on Earth. The Venus Express mission arrived at Venus in 2006 and will employ advanced imaging techniques outside the visible spectrum to uncover additional secrets in the years to come. In the desolate regions beyond the asteroid belt, the sun diminishes to a faint yellow point, and its weak rays are insufficient to maintain water in a liquid state. There are 12 substantial moons present, 6 of which exceed Pluto in size. They are significant realms with unique characteristics. Titan, Saturn's moon, is arguably the most plausible candidate for extraterrestrial life. Titan is distant and captivating. The pursuit of extraterrestrial life should not be confined to planets, as the principal moons of the solar system possess atmospheres, surface chemistry, and geological activity. Titan, although less than half the size of Earth, possesses an atmospheric mass 10 times greater. The surface pressure is almost double that of Earth's. Nitrogen constitutes the predominant element in our atmosphere. The surface is obscured, shrouded by a haze of biological fog. Titan's chemistry is expected to encompass numerous processes that transpired on primordial Earth immediately before the advent of life. Our initial detailed observation of Titan took place in mid-2004 when Cassini conducted a flyby during its exploration of Saturn, its rings, and its moons. Cassini is an extensive and intricate spacecraft, a collaborative project between NASA and the European Space Agency. It has a mass of approximately 3 tons and is comparable in size to an SUV. Cassini was constructed before NASA adopted the principle, faster, better, cheaper. Or, as some humorously phrased it, crappier, stingier, riskier. The mission followed a convoluted trajectory, circling twice through the inner solar system to utilize the sun's gravitational pull for a slingshot acceleration. It traversed a slender 10,000-mile chasm that divides Saturn's F-ring from the delicate ethereal G-ring. Galileo observed Saturn's rings as indistinct bands encircling the massive planet. They are remarkably slender. Envision a sheet of paper sufficiently large to encompass a football pitch. This represents the relative dimensions and thickness of the orbiting debris composed of rock and ice. The Cassini spacecraft has provided us with the most comprehensive observations of Saturn's moons. Mimas utilizes its gravitational influence to eliminate the substantial void in the rings, initially observed by Cassini. Enceladus seems exceptionally luminous, its surface adorned with water ice crystals expelled by geysers. The next celestial body is Iapetus, one hemisphere of which is inexplicably dark, resembling soot. Janus and Epimetheus share an orbit, engaging in an incessant game of tag, with one moon pursuing the other alternately. Lastly, there is the small Hyperion, orbiting Saturn in a tumbling manner akin to a spinning top. Space scientists necessitate the perseverance of Job. Envision dedicating 2 decades to a planetary probe project. Following the expenditure of several $1 billion and the traversal of 3 billion miles, you confront your ultimate assessment in a JPL control room populated with eager observers. Upon the launch of the Huygens probe towards Titan's surface by Cassini, team members were aware that its camera would transmit data for only 1 hour before the battery was depleted. A solitary misstep or miscalculation committed years prior could thwart their aspirations. It is time for the performance. No one comprehends this sentiment more profoundly than Caroline Porco. At the age of 13, she first observed Saturn via a friend's small telescope from a rooftop in the Bronx. The hook was established. "I was a thinker, a seeker," she states. And as her interests in philosophy and religion expanded, she commenced her studies in astronomy. She was a graduate student at Caltech when Voyager passed Saturn and the data began to arrive. The imaging crew was understaffed, prompting her to volunteer assistance. Consequently, a jewel landed in her possession. Saturn's rings seem as a vague blur via a tiny telescope. Nevertheless, Voyager revealed them to be intricately grooved, including captivating patterns and voids. The enigmatic spokes, linked to one of Saturn's principal rings, captivated Porco's interest. She experienced an epiphany upon recognizing a profound connection with Saturn's magnetic field. She continues to recall the exhilaration of being the inaugural individual to unveil one of nature's enigmas. The decade-long Voyager project afforded us our inaugural detailed observation of new worlds. It was epic, Porco states while reminiscing about the journey. There would be instances of significant discovery, followed by a return to the boat and departure for the next port. Porco commenced her tenure on Cassini as a junior research scientist, dedicating most of her career to this remote colossus of sensors and microelectronics. Voyager was profoundly romantic, she observes, but Cassini is extraordinary. A mission of this magnitude and complexity is all-consuming, and the intensity of the task permits little opportunity for contemplation. By the conclusion of the mission, she will have been engaged for over 18 years, and the comparison to child-rearing is not unfounded. There are highs and lows, emotions and obstacles, aspirations and setbacks. Their team's website prominently features photos that resemble family photographs. Observe the luminous, polished Enceladus, the rugged, jagged Hyperion, and Dione, whose surface resembles the visage of an aged individual. Images captured from 1 billion miles away have garnered significant media attention. The photograph of little Dione, positioned before the formidable Saturn, was the recipient of the Editor's Choice Award in Time magazine's 2005 Picture of the Year contest, and was also recognized as MSNBC's Best Space Photo that year. As Cassini approached Saturn, Porco gained widespread attention. She is in high demand at NASA news briefings, where her articulate and passionate demeanor distinguishes her in a domain characterized by sincere, although somewhat uninspired, male counterparts. Porco quickly developed a connection with Dan Golden, the former NASA administrator recognized for his transformative impact on the agency and his forthrightness. Both originate from New York City. Golden recognized in Porco the exceptional capacity to transcend technical proficiency and communicate the essential spark of surprise that propels the finest science. She articulates it as follows: "Since its inception, I have aspired to provide individuals with a sense of adventure. They were accompanying us on the spacecraft. The remarkable images undoubtedly assist. It encompasses poetry, beauty, and science interwoven," she states. Porco also possesses a whimsical aspect. She formerly formed a rock band named the Oestrogens and is an avid Beatles enthusiast. Her science website includes a photograph captured in London, where she and her colleagues replicated the Abbey Road walk. She is among the scientists influenced by Carl Sagan. Similar to him, Porco is a visionary who believes that our future is in outer space. Porco stated, "Titan is unequivocally the remarkable body within the Saturn system. However, she remains skeptical regarding the existence of microbial life on Titan. Titan is 200 degrees Fahrenheit colder than Earth. The surface water must be profoundly frozen. The speeds of chemical reactions will be exceedingly slow. Nonetheless, others have hypothesized that the surface could be enveloped in a dense organic sludge originating from ethane and methane. An ammonia-water mixture might remain in a liquid state under pressure under the surface. There may be geothermal springs." While the Huygens probe descended into the ethereal haze of Titan's upper atmosphere, Porco was at the European Space Operations Center in Darmstadt, Germany, delivering live commentary on the landing for CNN. Huygens scientists congregated in the control room, while other Cassini scientists viewed the event from various locations worldwide via live broadcasts. Linda Spilker, deputy project scientist, endured the disheartening remarks and challenges that numerous women continue to face in the realm of hard research. In the room was Guy Forget, the brooding Frenchman and wine expert who heads the team responsible for developing the aerosol measuring gadget on the probe. Nearby was Ralph Lawrence, the creator of the regrettably named Huygens Pen-ometer, who dedicated his leisure time to developing miniature flying equipment for the design of the ideal Frisbee. These individuals share a remarkable objective. They have utilized advanced human technology to acquire knowledge about a distant, stony planet in the solar system. As the data ultimately emerged, the tension dissipated. Applause and embraces ensued. Relief surged in waves. Engineers clad in plaid shirts exhibited tears in their eyes. One might envision the spirits of Giovanni Cassini and Christian Huygens observing with contentment. The Italian astronomer and engineer identified Jupiter's great red spot and the gap in Saturn's rings, which was named after him. Upon relocating to France, he established and became the inaugural director of the Paris Observatory, while concurrently serving as the court astronomer to Louis XIV, known as the Sun King. Cassini was so dedicated to his work that he declined an invitation to enter holy orders from Pope Clement IX. The eminent Dutch scientist Huygens refined the theory and design of telescopes and subsequently utilized his most advanced equipment to elucidate the mysteries of Saturn's rings. Upon discovering Titan in 1655, he remarked, "How immense is the joy of the heart of one who perceives things first." What observations did the Huygens probe make after years of anticipation? The parachute deployed in the upper atmosphere, and winds assailed the investigation as it descended through the dense medium. It materialized from the mist 20 miles above the surface and descended with a splatter into the Titanian mire. Weak sunshine had filtered through, imparting a muted orange hue to the landscape, reminiscent of asphalt illuminated by sodium lighting at night. Huygens possessed a unique calling card: 4 experimental rock compositions commissioned for the mission under the auspices of Mick Jagger. Geology possesses a peculiar universality. Huygens observed arid lakes and coastlines, stones and gravel, waterways and river deltas. The appearance is recognizable. However, the chemistry is entirely foreign. Titan is composed of liquid methane rather than liquid water. It contains snowballs rather than pebbles. A hydrocarbon grit rather than silicate dust precipitates from the dense atmosphere. Volcanoes emit ice and ammonia instead of lava. Titan experiences weather characterized by a nearly continuous precipitation of black methane rain. Fortunately, Huygens did not produce any sparks. Titan possesses a plethora of acetylene and propane alongside methane. With the introduction of oxygen, this environment becomes combustible. Methane ice cliffs rise on the horizon. One may see a somber Norse deity overseeing these remarkable fjords. To the dismay of many, Huygens did not discover ethane-methane oceans or lakes. They have likely either desiccated or are in a moon of aridity between periods of moisture. Nonetheless, enthusiasm resurfaced in mid-2006 when Cassini executed one of its numerous close flybys of Titan. A survey of the northern polar region revealed several lakes. At tropical latitudes where Huygens landed, temperatures are excessively high for liquid methane, which can, however, persist at the cooler polar latitudes. The lakes appear to be situated in calderas, geological formations indicative of volcanism, a phenomenon that continues to perplex planetary scientists. The chemical and biological potential of extensive hydrocarbon lakes is substantial. The Cassini-Huygens mission was a significant achievement. However, it represents merely an initial step. The lander possessed limited capacity to analyze the surface and sample the atmosphere briefly. The Cassini flybys will not approach within a few hundred kilometers and are limited to capturing photographs. Any comprehensive chemical analysis must be deferred to a subsequent trip, ideally one equipped with a rover. That could be 2 decades away. Is there a possibility of life being on Titan or beneath its surface? Traditionally, the habitable zone encompasses the distances from a star within which water can exist in liquid form on a planet's surface. The freezing region beyond the asteroid belt consistently appears implausible. Chris McKay possesses contrary knowledge. He understands that water can be maintained in a liquid state at elevated temperatures due to pressure beneath a planetary surface or through geological processes within the Earth. He understands that the largest moons of the gas giants are significant celestial bodies in their own right. Even diminutive bodies can experience heating as a result of tidal flexing induced by the parent planet. If life can exist beyond a conventional habitable zone, numerous viable locations for life may exist inside our solar system rather than a singular spot. Life requires no star whatsoever. McKay reflects with a smirk at the notion. In scientific inquiry, it can be advantageous to adopt radical perspectives, yet with moderation. If biology exists on Titan, it will be unprecedented in our experience. The presence of hydrocarbons, water, and diverse energy sources enables a series of events that can lead to the synthesis of amino acids and peptides. McKay proposed a metabolism reliant on acetylene, wherein the extreme cold moderates reactions to a pace that would be explosive on Earth. Energy emitted near hot springs might sustain localized biospheres, fire, and ice. Titan is the most Earth-like location in the solar system if one substitutes methane chemistry for water chemistry. This frigid and desolate moon may harbor micro-moonisms, little entities formed from the soil. If life exists here, one might reasonably conclude it could exist there. Life is synonymous with water. 75% of the Earth's surface is comprised of water. Life initially emerged in aquatic environments, and terrestrial creatures predominantly consist of water by mass. The Cassini-Huygens mission sparked significant public interest in the prospect of extraterrestrial life, and NASA aims to capitalize on this momentum to secure funding for a forthcoming expedition to another mysterious location in the outer solar system. Titan and Earth possess a dense, nitrogen-rich atmosphere and exhibit geological activity, whereas Europa and Earth have vast bodies of water. However, the sun's rays are weak at the considerable distance of Europa, resulting in these oceans being covered by a substantial layer of ice. The frigid terrain stimulates the imagination. Is it the residence of Hans Christian Andersen's Snow Queen, where a fragment of a shattered mirror embedded in your heart may compel you to remain eternally distant from the Earth's warmth? Alternatively, may this be the ninth and most abysmal circle of Dante's Inferno, Cocytus? Cocytus, immobilized by the flapping wings of Lucifer, serves as the ultimate destiny for traitors. They are trapped in ice, commensurate with their misdeeds, some submerged to their waists, others entirely encased. Envision the landscapes of Europa. Glacial expanses extend to the horizon. Irregular crevasses intersect the landscape, and towering ice formations rise majestically into the atmosphere. Angular forms exhibit the distorted reasoning of a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. Envision the sound of creaking and fracturing ice. There is insufficient atmosphere to transmit sound. The Arctic landscape is illuminated by dim sunlight. Jupiter resides in the obsidian sky, resembling a luminous eye. This little moon of Jupiter may be the most astonishing celestial body in the solar system. Water is regarded as a scarce resource in space, the essential element that distinguishes Earth from other planets. However, Europa contains more water than all of Earth's oceans combined. Astronomers believe that the ice layer on Europa is several hundred feet thick and conceals an ocean beneath. What makes water unique? It is the ubiquitous solvent, an ideal medium for intricate chemical reactions. Water is the sole liquid that expands upon freezing, guaranteeing that even at 5 times our distance from the sun, Europa remains unfrozen. Terrestrial species on Earth are predominantly composed of water, a vestige of our shared ancestry in the oceans. Water is transported to moons and planets by asteroids and comets, which are the remains of the formation of every solar system. Europa is likely one among numerous peculiar and aquatic celestial bodies in the universe. Europa was observed by the Galileo spacecraft in 1997. The Galileo mission was extended for several years to investigate the frozen moon further. The subsequent P-moon involves outfitting an orbiter with radar capable of ascertaining the thickness of the ice and water layers while functioning long enough to monitor the actual movement of the ice pack. This orbiter is unlikely to reach Jupiter before 2010. The Europa Ice Clipper is an astute continuation, engineered to deploy a 10-kilogram hollow copper sphere onto the ice. During a future trip, the spacecraft will traverse the debris generated by the hit and encapsulate it in an aerogel, ultimately returning the material to Earth several years later. The most ambitious future mission involves a lander that will deploy a probe known as a cryobot onto the surface. The cryobot would employ the thermal energy produced by its nuclear power source to penetrate the ice and deploy a hydrobot upon reaching the water. The hydrobot would traverse the environment, doing chemical analyses and searching for indications of life. The atmosphere presents a problem for the operation of delicate machinery. In addition to the extreme cold, Jupiter's vicinity is characterized by a powerful magnetic field and is exposed to significant cosmic radiation. The mission will be costly and challenging, and it is currently unfunded. A lander is expected to be a collaborative endeavor between the US and Europe, building upon the highly successful Cassini/Huygens mission. Planetary scientists debate the optimal landing site for Mars. Specific individuals prefer areas of the surface that exhibit a mottled appearance with red-brown hues. The coloration is unlikely to result from biological material or elevated radiation, yet these hydrated salts may suggest the existence of organic matter beneath the surface. Fortunately, there is a nearby location available for practice. Similar to how scientists travel to Chile's Atacama Desert to discover Martian analogs on Earth, they also venture to Antarctica's Lake Vostok to seek terrestrial analogs of Europa. Lake Vostok is situated deep within the Antarctic interior, concealed beneath 2 miles of ice. Comparable in size to Lake Ontario, it is an ecosystem that has remained isolated from the rest of the Earth for 1 million years. Geologists bored to within 400 feet of the sea, but halted, aiming to avoid contaminating this frigid, isolated environment. Upon resolution of the pollution issue, a hydrobot will be deployed. Europa is a leading contender for extraterrestrial life. It has all the essential components: water, organic materials, and energy derived from many sources: radioactive decay, tidal heating, ultraviolet radiation, and chemical gradients. However, the environment is sufficiently peculiar that we revert to an earlier notion. What if life is so bizarre that we fail to acknowledge it? The identification of extraterrestrial life poses a significant challenge. The most sensitive diagnostics, including DNA or RNA amplification, are highly specialized to our biological function and design, rendering them ineffective if metabolism or information storage were substantially altered. Nevertheless, a broader investigation focused on morphology or non-equilibrium chemistry may reveal evidence with a non-biological interpretation. Envision yourself at a lakeshore with your father. He is instructing you in the art of fishing. The lake is abundant in catfish, which are particularly fond of worms. He lures a hook with a plump worm, and indeed he is thereafter reeling in a catfish approximately every 15 minutes. That is how it operates, he asserts with confidence. Occasionally you catch a different species of fish, but predominantly it is catfish. He has experimented with several species of worms. Nevertheless, the outcome remains unchanged. Catfish prevail in this lake's ecosystem. In childhood, you embraced this narrative as it constituted the sole existence you had ever experienced. However, revisiting the lake as an adult reveals the constraints of your father's perspective. The lake contains many species of fish, some of which will accept a fly but reject a worm. Some crabs and other benthic organisms remain exclusively at the seabed, never ascending to the surface. A small quantity of water harbors several minuscule insects, writhing and darting. At times, one observes the silhouettes of creatures in the water that are sufficiently enormous to induce a shiver. While they are delectable when grilled over a fire, catfish represent but a fraction of life's offerings. If we utilize worms, our only catch will be catfish. In astrobiology, the search for carbon-based life forms in aquatic habitats and photosynthetic organisms energized by stellar radiation is anticipated to yield limited results. A biomarker is a substance or trait that signifies the existence of life. Jonathan Lunine of the Lunar and Planetary Laboratory in Tucson has extensively contemplated biomarkers. To select the optimal biomarkers, one must delineate the concept of life. Lunine enumerates the characteristics in a sequence from the most probable to the least likely to be universal. Carbon, water, energy acquired through electron exchange, termed redox reactions, or light harnessing. Energy storage in phosphate bonds, a biochemical coherence characterized by a selective utilization of all potential reactions. A robust molecule for the storage and transmission of genetic information. Metabolic processes encased within a membrane, thus self-contained. Initially, D, the final criterion, is cautious, although it directly results in the catfish dilemma. The comparable array of detection methods spans those capable of recognizing a broad spectrum of biological processes, although with considerable ambiguity, to those that concentrate on specific biological characteristics, risking the oversight of atypical life forms. Mineral biomarkers serve as the remnants and signatures of life, detectable long after an organism's demise. Metabolic processes typically produce carbonate in a dense crystalline form known as aragonite, as opposed to the more loosely structured calcite. Particular species accumulate chemicals and deposit residues upon death. For instance, sulfur metabolizing bacteria frequently produce unique sulfur granules as remnants. On occasion, minerals attach to the surfaces of a cell or bacterial filament, resulting in a resilient cast upon the organism's demise. Nearly all terrestrial living forms rely on iron, storing it in crystalline structures distinct from the iron present in common minerals. They can be recognized as they typically exhibit the imprint of the Earth's magnetic field. Magnetic tracers of life warrant particular attention as magnetism is anticipated to be a prevalent characteristic of planets. Joe Kirschvink of Caltech employs magnetic minerals to identify major extinctions and furnish compelling evidence for a snowball Earth scenario. For 30 years, it has been established that certain bacteria navigate by forming microscopic magnets from chains of iron particles. Magnetic sensing is observed in birds, aquatic species, and reptiles. Research by Kirschvink has led to the identification of magnetite-based sensory organs in higher animals. He contended that the perception of magnetic fields constituted the principal sense. A general method for detecting life involves examining the enrichment of the rare, heavier isotope of carbon in comparison to the standard, lighter isotope of carbon. During photosynthesis, the heavier isotope is absorbed at a slower rate than the lighter isotope, resulting in a deficit relative to the ratio found in lifeless sediments. A comparable technique can be applied using isotopes of iron. It is feasible to quantify the mass of intricate molecules within a rock specimen. A collection of masses will represent elements of a biological system, despite the individual molecules potentially being unidentifiable. Another practical approach entails investigating a significant surplus of left or right-handed molecules, as life does not employ them in equal ratios. The most definitive test is the amplification of DNA or RNA via polymerase chain reaction. PCR will not provide false positives. Nonetheless, it may fail to detect any life forms that do not utilize nucleic acids. The solar system presents a more abundant environment for life than previously believed. biospheres undergo evolution, indicating that adverse conditions do not necessarily imply a location has been perpetually devoid of life. The core of evolution is adaptability, and grim is an overly anthropocentric term to describe a beneficial outcome. What constitutes a hazardous environment for one extremophile may serve as a habitat of delight for another. When we transcend conventional parameters and contemplate biology beyond the confines of known terrestrial life, it can be difficult to discern. Where ought we to search? If life favors the most dynamic worlds, Mars may surprise us due to its predominantly lifeless state. Substantial moons prove to be equally intriguing in the quest for extraterrestrial life. Titan and Europa are intriguing. Jupiter's minor moon Callisto exhibits a fluctuating magnetic field, which virtually definitely signifies the existence of an ocean beneath its frozen surface. In early 2006, Saturn's tiger-striped moon Enceladus gained prominence after Cassini observed geysers erupting from its southern pole. It is remarkable to discover activity and water in a body of such diminutive size and considerable distance from the Sun. Carolyn Porco stated shortly after the discovery, "If our hypothesis is accurate, we have considerably expanded the range of solar system environments that may possess conditions conducive to life." NASA's approach to extraterrestrial life in the solar system has been to pursue the presence of water. This influences the design of Mars missions and shapes our assumptions for habitable worlds. Andrew Ingersoll of the Cassini imaging team has noted that other moons in the solar system possess liquid water oceans beneath several kilometers of icy crust. Meticulous modeling of the interiors of large moons by Adam Showman at the Lunar and Planetary Laboratory, among others, suggests an estimate of 12 to 15 solar system entities with liquid water concealed beneath ice or rock. A confluence of pressure, tidal heating, and radioactive decay within rock maintains the fluid state of water at considerable distances from the sun's warming rays. In the quest for extraterrestrial life, it is prudent to consider a few speculative possibilities, albeit with low probability, such as Venus and Jupiter's volatile moon, Io. The final and most improbable refuge for life is in the region beyond the planets. Over 140 distinct molecular kinds have been identified in the interstellar medium, including simpler amino acids. The reaction rates are likely insufficient for establishing a compelling metabolic network, yet the reality is that our knowledge on this matter is limited. Comets traverse distances thousands of times greater than that of Pluto from the Sun. The antiquated depiction of a soiled ice mass has transformed into the representation of a snowbank adorned with soot and biological matter. In 2006, the New Horizons spacecraft commenced its expedition to the recently reclassified Pluto and its terrestrial counterparts in the Kuiper Belt. The chemical composition of that environment remains unidentified. Life could permeate into outer space. It is understood that life-bearing rocks are expelled from the solar system due to impacts. In solar systems similar to ours, massive planets and their satellites can be expelled by gravitational forces, leading to the concept of habitable interstellar arcs. Given the extensive biological potential available to us, we are unavoidably compelled to explore the boundless possibilities of the cosmos. If the Earth were the size of a walnut held in front of you, the moon would be a pea held at arm's length, and the sun would be a glowing ball 10 feet across, about 400 yards away. On this scale, the solar system is 20 miles across, and the nearest star is a glowing ball, 50,000 miles away. Space is numbingly, staggeringly enormous. For more than 2,000 years, dreamers have imagined that Earth is not unique, that distant stars also have rocky bodies orbiting them. Astronomers are equipped with powerful telescopes, but finding extrasolar planets, or exoplanets, is an exceedingly difficult task. In the analogy of the Earth as a walnut lit by a star a quarter of a mile away, the nearby star is a point of light with its planet a hair's breadth away. Imagine trying to detect the glimmer of the walnut from a distance of 50,000 miles. The suspense is finally over. Our solar system is not unique. Astronomers have detected more than 250 extrasolar planets since 1995. They've mainly used an indirect method. Giant planets tug the star they orbit, and the subtle motion can be detected as a repeating variation in the spectrum of the star. Planets can also be observed when they pass in front of their star and dim it slightly, as well as when they pass in front of a more distant star and the gravitational force of the planet amplifies its light. Many of the new worlds are puzzling because they're gas giant planets orbiting their stars more closely than Mercury orbits the Sun. Large planets, like Jupiter, are the easiest to detect. Theorists are attempting to explain solar systems with architectures that are vastly different from our own. Scientists are discovering giant exoplanets at a rate exceeding one per month, intensifying their search for distant Earths. We will need telescopes of unprecedented stability and precision for this task. Astronomers use deformable mirrors that cheat image-smearing turbulence in the atmosphere. They look at infrared wavelengths, where an incredible planet will show up more easily next to a much hotter star. They eventually plan to use free-floating telescopes in space, aligned with lasers, to form images so sharp that Earths can be seen directly. The most ambitious goal requires new telescopes, big enough to capture the feeble reflected light from an exoplanet and disperse it into a spectrum. Such a new level of information can reveal whether or not a planet has surface water. Spectroscopy may also reveal evidence of a biosphere, in the form of reactive gases such as oxygen and ozone, as well as biochemical tracers like chlorophyll. This evidence may be the first indication that the universe is alive. A dozen years of discoveries have shown that planets form naturally and inevitably when stars form. Combined with the fact that stars create universal chemistry, the table has been set for life. But is anyone dining? Earth-like planets may be special, but the vast size and abundance of the universe offset their rarity. In the Milky Way alone, there could be enough habitable planets that we're unlikely to be dining by ourselves. The first pictures of an Earth clone will be disappointing. It may not even be as impressive as Carl Sagan's pale blue dot, as he described the Earth as seen from the vantage point of the flying Voyager spacecraft, at a distance of several billion miles. The first spectra of Earth clones will be noisy and of poor quality, and scientists will agonize mightily over whether they contain evidence of life elsewhere. Won't it be easier to visit these worlds? Not yet. Returning to our solar system analogy, the farthest people have traveled is the arm's length from the walnut Earth to the pea moon, and the Apollo missions cost about $150 billion in present-day dollars. The nearest stars are 50,000 miles away in that scale model, or 100 million times farther. Space exploration is challenging. It's expensive to protect people from the harsh environment of space, and spacecraft are slow and inefficient because they're powered by chemical fuel. Despite this, our robotic emissaries have traveled to all the planets and explored the major moons of Jupiter and Saturn. For decades, debate has raged among space scientists and policymakers over the usefulness of humans in space. It's a story of competing visions. NASA has an uneven track record since the glory days of the Apollo program. The space shuttle is obsolete and dangerous. Scientists despise the space station, a costly international project, and companies that once flocked to it for R&D have abandoned it. Some hope to send astronauts back to the moon and then on to Mars, at a staggering cost of $150 to $200 billion. The vision of humans living and working in space remains a powerful inspiration. When it comes to the stars, however, our technology is still in its infancy. The fastest spaceship would take tens of thousands of years to reach Alpha Centauri. However, youthful technologies are maturing. The private sector is starting to flex its muscles, and the first plausible plan for interstellar travel will likely occur in our lifetimes. The stillness of the night was broken by the sound of corks popping and the first hints of birdsong as the eastern sky began to pale. It was early in the morning of July 5th, 1995, at the Haute-Provence Observatory in southern France. Astronomers Michel Mayor and Didier Queloz had just woken their wives to celebrate with champagne and raspberry tarts. They had discovered an invisible object, about half the mass of Jupiter, in a rapid orbit around a bright star in the constellation of Pegasus. It was the first planet ever discovered around a star like the Sun. Champagne moments are rare in science. Before 1995, the path to extrasolar planets was strewn with pitfalls. 1. Groups invested dozens of nights of telescope time in the search and came up empty-handed. Others made claims that were shot down or were retracted. Mayor and Queloz worked hard for 18 months before their success. News of the discovery was bittersweet for planet hunters Jeff Marcy and Paul Butler, 5,000 miles away in California. Marcy had been running an experiment for 8 years and had removed the star 51 Pegasi from his sample due to an error in the star catalog. Competition around the world was intense. A Nobel Prize may have been on the line. He'd been scooped. 2. Yet there was vindication in knowing that planets were waiting to be discovered. Marcy and Butler realized they could mine their data for similar objects, and by the end of 1995, they'd found 3 more exoplanets. It then became clear that a team led by David Latham had made an earlier observation of a planet in 1989. The breakthrough paved the way for further discoveries. The census stands at just over 250 planets. Most orbit main sequence stars like the Sun, but a growing number are being discovered around dwarf stars. At least 25 systems have multiple planets. Marcy's group has made outstanding strides and announced a batch of 28 new planets at one meeting in Honolulu in mid-2007. A new scientific field has blossomed. But why was it so difficult to detect planets for the first time, and why have astronomers been puzzled by the properties of many of the planets found so far? The search for other solar systems operates at the limit of telescopes. A nearby star, similar to the Sun, would be like a 100-watt light bulb 1 mile away. A modest telescope comfortably detects such a star. Planets don't emit their light, so the reflected light from a Jupiter in orbit is several billion times fainter. Even so, a large telescope can detect such a feeble signal. The real problem is resolution. At the distance of the nearest stars, Jupiter and the Sun would be separated by about 1 arc-second, which is how much the atmosphere blurs incoming starlight. In the analogy, the planet is 1 billion times fainter and only 1/4 inch away from a 100-watt light bulb, a mile away. It would be challenging even if you were much closer. Imagine trying to spot a firefly in the glare of the floodlights of a football stadium. Success came instead via the indirect method of looking for the gravitational tug that the orbiting planet exerts on the star. In our solar system, Jupiter is the most massive planet, and it makes the Sun pirouette like a fat dancer. The wobble is too subtle to be seen in an image, but it can be detected in the star's spectrum using the Doppler effect. As an orbiting Jupiter tugs its star to and fro slightly, the light from the star shifts blueward, then redward by 13 meters per second every 12 years. This is sprinting speed equivalent to only 0.0000005% of the speed of light, making it very challenging to measure. Planet hunting demands precision and patience. If Jeff Marcy had thought too much about how difficult it was, he might have given up long before 1995. However, He possessed a unique combination of vision and stubbornness that could lead to greatness in science. When Marcy was a graduate student at the University of California, Santa Cruz, he was riddled with self-doubt. He said, "I felt like I was an imposter, surrounded by all these high-powered people." As a postdoctoral student, Marcy's situation did not improve. He thought about leaving science. Then, one morning while he was in the shower, an idea came to him. Rather than beat himself up over his lack of brilliance, he decided to reconnect with the joy and wonder that turned him on to astronomy as a young child. "I had to find a question to work on that I cared about at a gut level. That question was whether or not our solar system is unique." Marcy is soft-spoken, with a polite, almost old-world demeanor. He has a trim goatee, dark eyes, and a receding hairline, the inversion of facial hair he shares with his graduate student Paul Butler, his friendly rival, Michael Mayer, and many astronomers. At Lick Observatory, he and Butler subsisted on scraps, a few nights scattered through the year where the moon was too bright for the people who worked on faint stars and galaxies. Light is not the problem. Their telescope could gather millions of photons per second from nearby stars. The critical requirement for the discovery was a spectrograph of unprecedented accuracy and stability. Enter Steve Vogt. Based in Santa Cruz, Vogt has built a series of magnificent spectrographs, culminating in a machine that receives heavy use at the Keck Observatory, home to the world's largest telescopes. Instrument builders are the unsung heroes of astronomy. Starting with Brahe and Galileo, almost every significant discovery in astronomy has depended on technical advances. Marcy and Butler were aware that they would be collaborating with the most advanced technology. They were deeply appreciative of this opportunity. As Butler put it, "When we detect planets, we're sailing in Steve's ship." Given an accuracy of 10 meters per second or so, Jupiters can be detected. Each Doppler curve is nearly a sinusoid, where the size of the velocity shift reflects the mass of the planet, and the frequency indicates the orbital period. Mayer and Queloz detected the first planet with a telescope 5 times smaller than Marcy and Butler's. They were the little Swiss engine that could. Their discovery was part of a larger shift in the power structure of astronomy. For most of the 20th century, American astronomy was dominant, led by private universities and philanthropists such as Yerkes, Hale, Carnegie, and Keck. Now, more than half of the world's largest telescopes are not in American hands, and the European Space Agency is competitive with NASA for space astronomy. The American share of research papers has fallen below 50% for the first time. This change is healthy. The cosmos belongs to everyone. After the difficulty came the surprise. Marcy and Butler had more data and better accuracy than the Swiss. Still, they missed the first discovery because they were looking for solar systems like ours, where giant planets, far from their parent stars, take a leisurely decade or more to complete an orbit. Instead, 51 Pegasi has an Earth-like planet that orbits its star in just 4 days. Imagine a planet half Jupiter's size in a sweltering orbit 7 times closer to the Sun than Mercury. It turns out 51 Pegasi is not a fluke. Marcy and his team are the champions of planet hunting. They have increased the number of stars they survey from 100 to 1,000, and they now use the mighty Keck telescopes in Hawaii for much of their work. Each discovery no longer spawns a newspaper headline, but now the real science can be done. 6. With more than 250 exoplanets in the bag, what have we learned? Since the invention of the telescope, we've learnt the quirks and foibles of our siblings, the 7 other planets of the solar system, plus poor, misbegotten Pluto. Now we've located several hundred members of our extended clan, and we can describe their general characteristics. Most of these family members are rather strange. First, most of the planets are Jupiter's mass or larger. There's no surprise there. Planet detection pushes against the limits of instrumentation and noise. We should readily find all the planets more massive than Jupiter. Astronomers are in a similar position with minor planets. However, the mass distribution of exoplanets piles up at the limit of detection, which is a powerful hint that there are many more minor planets waiting to be discovered. If most of the fish in your net are only slightly bigger than the holes, many got away. The next surprising feature of these giant planets is that they don't live where we expect them to. Almost all exoplanets are closer to their stars than Jupiter is to the Sun, and half are closer than Earth is to the Sun. These super-hot Jupiters are a puzzle because we think we know how our solar system came to be arranged the way it is. And these new systems have a very different layout. Astronomers must exercise caution when interpreting this. If you camped in a forest for a week, you could observe the flowers opening and closing from day to night, and even notice some growth over that time. But the pines towering overhead would seem immutable. You would have to return over the years to see any changes. Similarly, the planet hunters are only just now accumulating enough high-quality data to find giant planets at the distances they occupy in our solar system. Marcy and his team see massive planets on tight orbits around 7% of the Sun-like stars they survey. A similar or slightly larger percentage might have giant planets at distances identical to our solar system. That makes 1 in 6 stars with giant planets. The fraction with Earth's is unknown. Many of the new planets are highly eccentric, not in their personalities, but in their orbits. Eccentricity is the amount by which an orbit deviates from a circle. In our solar system, most planets have eccentricities of a few percent. Since planets form out of a circular disk of material, they become eccentric due to subsequent interactions with gravity. The only 2 planets with an eccentricity of 0.2, 20% or higher, are Mercury and Pluto. The former has been tugged by the Sun, and the latter is a captured interloper. Approximately 85% of the newly discovered exoplanets have an eccentricity of 0.1 or greater. Their orbits are considerably more elliptical than those of Jupiter and Saturn. European and US teams have improved the precision of the Doppler technique from 10 meters to 1 meter per second, equivalent to a leisurely walking pace. The Doppler curve of the most massive planet reveals multiple giant planets and super-Earths as harmonics. Pythagoras was right. A harmony exists among the spheres. The pulsar planets are a prime example of pure exotica. Pulsars are rapidly spinning neutron stars left over from titanic stellar explosions. There's a pulsar 1,500 light-years away in Virgo with 4 rocky planets in an uncanny representation of our inner solar system, scaled down by a factor of 2. The most minor planet is only 20% of Pluto's mass. The first pulsar planets were found 5 years before the Earth, around 51 Pegasi. Pulsars keep such exquisite time that it's easy to notice if an orbiting planet is throwing off their rhythm. But pulsars have survived a supernova, and their planets are so baffling that astronomers set them aside in the box they keep for things we don't understand. With a little effort, we can imagine the scene if we were magically transported to these strange new worlds. As we hover above one of the super-Jupiters, the parent star sizzles overhead. This giant gas ball orbits its star in a week, so close at its closest approach that the star fills half the sky. Next, we find ourselves on the surface of a twin of Uranus. Its star is also nearby, shimmering through a parboiled atmosphere. The planet is tidally locked to the star, but even on the dark side, there's no respite. The hot gloom makes it seem like an antechamber to Hades. Last, we hop to one of the pulsar planets. It is a pitted, airless world like the Moon. The neutron star is low in the sky, like a dark fist just above the horizon. The sky crackles with magnetic energy, which surges every time the crust of the rapidly spinning neutron star shifts. At this point, we yearn for home. These planets answer an ancient question, says Marcy, whose early insecurity has given way to the pride of a pioneer. Over 2,000 years ago, the Greek philosophers Aristotle and Epicurus argued about whether there are other Earth-like planets. Now, for the first time, we have evidence of rocky planets around normal stars. The Copernican revolution still has legs. Astronomers have only begun to explore the abundance of exoplanets. They haven't inspected stars that are very different from the Sun, and they can't use the Doppler method to detect planets much smaller than Neptune or Uranus. The prevalence of hot Jupiters and elliptical orbits is disconcerting. What if our solar system is unusual, violating the Copernican principle of mediocrity? The truth is that it's too early to tell. As the data accumulates, we're beginning to see planets in familiar settings. The process of planet formation creates a wide range of architectures, of which our solar system is just one example. The growing census of planets leaves many questions unanswered. What is the composition of these planets? Do they have moons? Are any of them habitable? How common are Earths? Star wobble only gives an exoplanet's mass and orbit. Other methods must answer the rest. But the number of planets rises rapidly with decreasing mass, so there may be many millions of habitats for life in our galaxy alone. Looking for Doppler wobbles has been an enormous success, but it's not the only way to find planets. Astronomers can also detect them by their fleeting shadows. Another method is planet hunting by brute force. Dogged determination and modern technology are used to overcome these long odds. CCD detectors are efficient, turning nearly every incoming photon into an electrical signal. It's easy to gather enough light to detect small changes in one star compared to its unwavering companions. Telescopes stare at millions of stars at a time, either by looking deep in a small area of sky or by tiling the focal plane with CCDs. Even amateur astronomers are playing their part in this rapidly evolving field. They've detected several giant planet transits, one of which was nailed with a 4-inch backyard telescope. Only about 10% of the exoplanets are oriented such that a transit has been detected. But these systems offer the possibility of follow-up. Since orbits repeat, it's only a matter of time, a few months or a few years, before the transit recurs. Then, astronomers can turn their large telescopes onto the target. The Hubble Space Telescope has observed several planet transits with its spectrograph. As light from the parent star filters through the planet's atmosphere, absorption lines imprint the chemical composition of gas in the atmosphere on the spectrum of the star. Careful timing reveals the size of the giant planet. Such information can't be obtained with the Doppler method. Water was detected in the atmosphere of one transiting planet in 2007. This last result is very significant. The planet detection rate in Doppler surveys depends strongly on the metallicity of the parent star. Astronomers are cavalier in their chemistry, classifying all elements heavier than helium, including the primary planet-building materials iron, nickel, carbon, silicon, and oxygen, as metals. The average planet detection rate of approximately 5% conceals a rising trend in the abundance of heavy elements. If heavy elements are rare, there's nothing to make planets with. But when the star has 3 times the Sun's heavy elements, the planet detection rate soars to 30%. Stars have been fusing and spitting out heavy elements for 13 billion years. So if a star contains planet-building material, it's a safe bet that its cooling nebula formed planets. Pity Sean Hughes. He's observing with a small telescope in the Warrumbungle Mountains of New South Wales. The charms of Australian flora and fauna fade after the 31st night of a 50-night observation run. Hughes is looking for one star among 5 million that might vary. Every 5 minutes, the CCD dumps another image to disk. At 100 megabytes each, it's beneficial that memory is dirt cheap. Hughes is running software that subtracts each stellar image from the previous one and identifies any objects that have dimmed or brightened. He's in a football stadium, trying to spot the one person who's going to moon him for a second. The moon has swept through a complete cycle of phases, but Hughes has seen nothing. At this point, he'd settle for a slight positional drift, the signature of a near-Earth object. Getting his name on an asteroid might take the sting out of not finding a new planet. Luckily, a summer storm passes through, so Hughes can slink off to the pub in nearby Coonabarabran to down a couple of middies. Hughes is looking for the signature of microlensing, a method of finding planets that's even more challenging than a transit search, but has the potential to detect Earths. Microlensing stems from a prediction made by Albert Einstein in 1936. According to his general theory of relativity, mass distorts space, and then light bends as it follows space's curvature. Light from a distant object is deflected when it passes close to an intervening object. If the mass is enormous, the effect is dramatic. Distant quasars are lensed into a mirage of two images or a cloverleaf. Distant galaxies are distorted into tiny arcs, much like in a funhouse mirror. Less mass means less bending. When the lens is a star or planet, the light deflection is too subtle to detect. In microlensing, the image appears undisturbed, but a detectable amount increases its brightness. 8. Something goes in front of it and makes it dimmer. That's logical. But how can something go in front of something else and make it brighter? Mass constantly deflects light as it travels through the universe. Analogous to a familiar optical lens, a concentration of matter can focus and magnify a bundle of light rays. In a cosmic average sense, we don't receive something for nothing. Other regions of space have light that's spread out and demagnified. How does this aid the search for planets? Lensing is a mass effect, not a light one, so the temporary brightening is visible even if the object is dark. In other words, a background star can be lensed by a planet just as readily as by another star. The duration of brightening depends on the mass of the lens. For massive planets like Jupiter, the process lasts a few days. For Earth-like planets, it takes a couple of hours. Lensing depends on a perfect alignment of foreground and background objects. However, two stars will generally have unique space motions. When the planet belonging to one star passes in front of a more distant star, they're like captains of ships passing in the night. One salute, and they sail into the darkness, never to see each other again. Microlensing, unlike transits, occurs only once. If the brightening is brief and doesn't repeat, how do we know it's not just a star with indigestion, burping up gas, or varying its output slightly? When gravity acts on the light, it doesn't care about the wavelength. Microlensing's trademark is a smooth and symmetric rise and fall in brightness, equal to both red and blue light. This property distinguishes it from all types of stellar activity, in which the changing temperature of the gas causes unequal variations in red and blue light. When a distant star begins to brighten smoothly, as shown in the lower panel, it triggers careful observations by a larger telescope. Microlensing causes a temporary amplification. The unseen foreground star amplifies the symmetric rise and fall in brightness, a trademark of the background star, which results from this rare gravitational effect. As with transits, microlensing surveys focus on moderately bright stars and can therefore be conducted with smaller telescopes. Sean Hughes uses a refurbished telescope on a mediocre site that would be beneath the regard of a prima donna observer, spoiled by 8-meter behemoths. And as with transits, amateurs play a vital role in following up the trigger of a rising light curve. Jenny McCormick, an amateur astronomer in Auckland, said, "It just shows that you can be a mother, you can work full-time, and you can still go out there and find planets." This challenging path has led to the discovery of just 4 planets, but the enormous promise of microlensing has already been revealed. In 2005, scientists discovered 2 planets among the lowest mass exoplanets, with one weighing just 5.5 times the mass of Earth. This planet is 22,000 light-years away, and it orbits a dim red dwarf only 1/5 the mass of the Sun, so its surface temperature is a frigid minus 370 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 223 degrees Celsius. The discovery of such a modest planet among the first handful of detections suggests that Earths might be abundant. Radial velocity surveys are successfully identifying hot Jupiters, while microlensing surveys are starting to identify cold Neptunes, allowing us to pinpoint the habitable zone. Microlensing has a promising future. The projects so far have been significant international collaborations marked by acronyms such as EROS, OGLE, MACHO, and MicroFUN. The microlensers plan to refurbish and orchestrate a set of cast-off small telescopes around the world to achieve 24-hour coverage of the entire sky. They'll be able to boost their currently feeble statistics and detect a dozen new planets per year. Earth clones are within their grasp. An orbiting satellite designed to observe 100 million stars simultaneously will be able to detect planets as minor as Mercury, but it's not yet funded. As always, the microlensers bide their time and practice patience. Bohdan Paczynski proposed lensing as a method to detect exoplanets long before any had been discovered. His broad, amiable face creases easily into a smile. He talks calmly about his plan to find distant worlds, as if he had all the time in the world. With cropped white hair and the clipped, crisp accent of his native Poland, he's like the grandfather who explains something to you with outstanding patience, but expects you to get it right eventually. Paczynski is dying. He has an inoperable brain tumor. This fact doesn't even cause a ripple in his placid demeanor. Paczynski is voracious in his interests. As a professor at Princeton, he works on a wide range of topics, from planets to cosmology. He's primarily a theorist, not the modern brand of astronomical theorist who pours equations into a computer and programs it to calculate the appearance of a piece of the universe. Paczynski is a classical theorist, capable of performing sophisticated calculations using simple mathematical equations. One of his proudest achievements is purely observational. He led a group of Polish compatriots in a project to detect planets using the microlensing technique and a small telescope. Having observed the rise and fall of communism and fascism in Central Europe, Paczynski understands the difficulty of achieving anything worthwhile. So it is with microlensing. There are 2 significant drawbacks to using gravity to discover planets. One is the smallness of stars and planets compared to the vastness of space. A survey must stare at millions of stars to have a chance of success. Furthermore, the planet passes in front of the star for a short while, and the signal never repeats. Although we have found a new planet, it evades our grasp, and our long list of questions about it remains unanswered. 10 years ago, Paczynski was unperturbed by the long odds. He set up a small telescope with a big-format CCD camera, and he staffed it with a handful of dedicated young observers. With a characteristic mix of brilliance and dogged determination, the group has detected dozens of intriguing low-mass stars and 2 exoplanets, competing successfully with larger and better-funded teams. In the end, that's all any of us can ask for, to be a momentary brightening in the darkness. The plethora of planets presents astronomers with a puzzle. Did gas giant planets form around their parent stars, or did they migrate from farther away, and if so, how? Theorists struggle to answer these questions. It would be ironic to discover that solar systems are standard while realizing that ours is more special than ever. The theory of planet formation is still relatively primitive. Complexity is part of the problem. Newton's elegant law of gravity allows for a precise calculation of the trajectory only for the case of two objects. With hundreds of objects, there are tens of thousands of forces as each object acts on all the others. In this case, the gravity calculation is only a good approximation. However, the planets in the solar system arose from thousands of chunks of rock, called planetesimals, which means that millions of forces must be taken into consideration. Each planetesimal formed from billions of dust grains, illustrating the complexity of the process. This complexity makes it impossible to reverse engineer planet formation by running the calculation backward to see how things looked at the beginning. The converse is also true. A slight change in the starting conditions can lead to the formation of a different set of planets. Once planets form, their chance encounters can alter the architecture of a solar system. Planets collide and fragment. Gas giants eject comets, and sometimes terrestrial planets, or they send debris hurtling inward. Although statistical understanding of these processes exists, no specific case can be predicted with certainty. Chaos leaves its mark on every solar system. Like all scientists, astronomers are embracing Moore's law, which dictates that computer power doubles every 18 months. Memory and storage are now so affordable that they can perform inconceivable simulations that were previously unimaginable. To make planets, place a gas cloud into your computer, switch on gravity, and wait for it to collapse. Then, ignoring the central star, follow the complex gravitational dance of the accretion process. Other subtle forces are taken into account. Approximations must be made. Now you play Sorcerer's Apprentice, changing the initial conditions to see what emerges. Some solar systems are reassuringly familiar, others are startlingly different. Each of them may exist somewhere in the universe. It takes a brilliant theorist to compete in the age of computation. 30 years after his initial impact on planetary dynamics, Peter Goldreich remains a formidable competitor. His early work was prescient in describing many characteristics of the new exoplanets. Goldreich has an uncanny intuition for gravity. He's also a black belt and has a Brooklyn accent and a boxer's nose. He can deliver cruel blows to researchers with flawed ideas. But he's unstinting in his support of the best of the younger generation. One of those is Renu Malhotra. Goldreich was her mentor, and she shares his preference for analytic elegance over computational number crunching. Malhotra's calm equanimity proved helpful when she transitioned from an all-girls high school outside Delhi to a university where she was nearly the only woman among 100 men. In conversation, she has the disarming habit common to Indians of using the roll axis of head motion, in addition to the familiar pitch for yes and yaw for no, for an equivocal reaction. She's serene, which is an unusual attribute for a scientist. The theorists use math to tease regularity out of the seemingly random motions of small planetary bodies. Widely separated rocks in space can have their orbital periods synchronized by the ratios of whole numbers, a phenomenon known as resonance. It's an echo of the Pythagorean music of the spheres. There is synchrony in the interactions of planets and their moons. Mimas sweeps out Cassini's division. Cordelia and Ophelia shepherd a slender ring of Uranus. And our moon turns one cheek toward us, like a doting lover. Solar systems operate with a curious mixture of regularity and chaos. The current best theory on how planets form is known as the core accretion model. It begins with the rapid growth of dust particles into rocks, then into mountains, and ultimately into terrestrial planets. This excellent progression in size, from microns to meters to kilometers to a rock as big as the Earth, is the most reliable part of the story. Gravity depends on mass, so it acts to accelerate the growth. Harvard researcher Scott Kenyon has said, "The dust bunnies under your bed grow similarly. After 1,000,000 years, a dust bunny can grow quite big." Forming Earths is straightforward. In the outer part of a solar system where it's cooler, When a planet's core gets to about 10 Earth masses, it can grab gas from the surrounding disk and build an envelope that turns it into a gas giant. This process stops when the gas is used up or is driven out by radiation from the young stars. That's the basic idea of core accretion. But there are two problems with the theory. Data from the Galileo probe has shown that Jupiter's core may be only 3 Earth masses, which is too small for accretion to work correctly. Additionally, forming a Jupiter takes several million years. Still, recent results from the Spitzer Space Telescope suggest that disks often don't last long enough, and giant planets may form in as little as 1 million years. A second idea is on the table. Its strongest advocate is Alan Boss from Carnegie Observatory. Lumps can form within a disk due to gravitational instability and potentially grow into terrestrial planets in as little as 100 to 1,000 years. In computer simulations, disks become unstable and spirals, eddies, and rings are observed. However, the simulations aren't yet accurate enough to determine whether a combination of gravitational instability and core accretion can explain the formation of giant planets. If we don't fully understand the formation of normal giant planets, how on Earth do we explain the newly discovered extrasolar Jupiters with tight elliptical orbits? These hot Jupiters could not have formed where they are now, because the temperatures are too high to support the growth of a giant gaseous envelope. Giant planets migrate from much larger distances and then park in orbits close to the parent star. The mechanisms for migration and parking are hotly debated, with no consensus in sight. The elliptical orbits support the idea that the giants weren't formed close to the star. Gas in the protostellar disk follows circular orbits. It's a good bet their elongated orbits resulted from interactions with other planets. A lovely example is the Upsilon Andromeda system, which features a very hot inner Jupiter mass planet and 2 moderately hot planets, approximately 2 and 4 times the mass of Jupiter, all on elliptical orbits. Co-discoverer Deborah Fisher asked her classmates to name their young children. Their choices were Two-Piter, Four-Peter, and Dinky. A team at Northwestern University created a precise model of this solar system. It demonstrated that the orbits could be understood if an unseen fourth planet came too close and collided with the inner planets in a gravitational feud. The troublemaking planet was ejected, but the remaining Jupiters still show imprints of the disturbance in their elliptical orbits. Observations indicate that conditions in star-forming regions are very chaotic, with unpredictable implications for planet formation. Simulations are essential because they suggest that planets may not have always been arranged in their current configuration. Occasionally, they jostle one another. Occasionally, they scatter like 10 pins. Our imagination and computation may limit the range of outcomes. In the simulations, planets assembled by gravitational accretion from smaller pieces, and water reached the inner solar system on debris sent inward by the gravity of giant planets. The best simulations pique our curiosity about potential discoveries. Water delivery depends on the location of the giant planets. Sean Raymond is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Colorado. However, while still a graduate student in Seattle, he did eye-catching work on water delivery in young solar systems. In most simulations, he and his collaborators found several terrestrial planets, ranging from 1/4 to 4 times the mass of Earth. The majority of these were in the traditional habitable zone, where water is liquid on a planet's surface. The water content ranged from bone dry to hundreds of times the water content of all the Earth's oceans. Water worlds may be common. Raymond's more recent simulations have concentrated on mimicking the known systems of exoplanets. Hot Jupiters on close orbits to their stars were once thought to be bad news for terrestrial planets because the gas giants act like unruly bullies, tossing the more minor planets out as they barge through the inner parts of their solar systems. However, with a dozen desktop computers crunching for more than 8 months, Raymond found that while the giant planets are indeed disruptive, it's not all bad news for water worlds. As the hot Jupiters park in their tight orbits, they fling rocky debris outward, where it can coalesce into Earth-like objects. At the same time, small, icy bodies in the dense outer parts of the gas disk slow down and spiral inward, delivering water to the fledgling Earths. 1/3 of the giant planet systems discovered so far may harbor Earth-like planets covered in deep, global oceans. Meanwhile, Willy Benz and his group in Switzerland are conducting very ambitious simulations that take into account the limitations of the Doppler detection method. This allows them to predict the properties of the whole population rather than just the massive tip of the iceberg. Benz works in Bern, proving once again that the Swiss should be known for their expertise as well as their traditional products, such as cuckoo clocks and chocolate. Their conclusion: we're nowhere near recovering all of the exoplanets. With the precision of most existing data, only 3% of planets are found, and the fraction of normal giant planets discovered is no higher. Even with the current best precision of 1 meter per second, the simulations suggest that only 5% of all planets are recovered. Earth's remains remain tantalizingly out of reach, but everything we know now suggests the universe contains vast numbers of them. The detection of exoplanets is a stunning achievement, but the planets discovered so far are mostly broiling Jupiters, along with a few icy Neptunes. They seem alien and uninhabitable. How long will it be before astronomers quicken our pulses by discovering a twin of the Earth? The technical requirements for detecting distant terrestrial planets are forbidding. Compared to Jupiter, the Earth is 300 times less massive and 5 times closer to the Sun, so it's a much smaller lever on the Sun. This reduces a Doppler wobble of 13 meters per second to an undetectable 9 centimeters per second, the pace of a scuttling beetle. So far, the Doppler method has had the best success, but it will likely lose traction in the search for planets less massive than Uranus and Neptune. The current record holder is a planet just 5 times more massive than the Earth, orbiting the red dwarf Gliese 581. It's only 20 light-years away and seems to have conditions suitable for liquid water. In theory, a planet's tug can directly detect the wobble of a star. If we compare a nearby star to a 100-watt light bulb 1 mile away, it appears no larger than a speck of dust. However, the Earth's atmosphere blurs incoming light by about 1 arc-second, which smears the dust speck up to the size of a dime. The wobble of the star caused by a Jupiter would be 1,000 times smaller angle, 10 to 3 arc-seconds. Imagine a dime at a distance of a mile, exhibiting a wobble equivalent to the thickness of a single hair on FDR's head. That's serious enough. But the wobble caused by an orbiting Earth would be 1,000 times more minor, or 1/1,000,000th of the amount that the atmosphere blurs starlight. The situation is more favorable for the direct detection of planets through imaging. The Earth is 1/10 Jupiter's size, but 5 times closer to the Sun, so it reflects 4 times less light than Jupiter. In our scale model, Jupiter is 1 billion times fainter than the star, sitting at the edge of the blurred-out dime of stellar light. This is challenging but doable, and 2005 marked the first-ever direct detection of exoplanets. Both detections were super-Jupiters far from their parent stars, and one was orbiting a brown dwarf. An Earth in this scenario is much harder to detect. 4 times fainter and 5 times closer to the star, its feeble light would be engulfed in the star's light. Transits of Earth-like planets are also difficult to detect from the ground. Seen from a distance, Jupiter would dim the Sun by 1%, but only 1 in 1,000 randomly orientated systems is aligned so that the transit is visible. Furthermore, the transit lasts for only 1/4000th of the orbit, 30 hours every 12 years. The closer orbit of Earth improves the odds of orientation and timing. 1 in 200 systems has the correct orientation, and the transit lasts 1/700th of the orbit, 13 hours in a year. However, this good news is offset by the fact that the smaller Earth dims a star by a much lesser amount than Jupiter, a minuscule 0.01%. The ground cannot achieve the required precision in photometry. The world's top telescope designers and instrument builders have taken on the challenge of detecting terrestrial planets. Telling them it can't be done makes them work harder. Breakthroughs will come from a mix of ground and space-based telescopes. For light-gathering power, the ground wins. Each Keck telescope collects 20 times more light than the Hubble Space Telescope. For image sharpness, there's no substitute for the vacuum of space. Image sharpness also improves when shorter waves are used. Roger Angell is the heir to William Herschel and George Ellery Hale, the architect of the Mount Wilson and Mount Palomar observatories. 20 years ago, he was aware that he had already achieved all the easy gains. Detectors were nearly perfect. Telescopes had grown to the point where they sagged under their weight. He devised a method to create large, rigid mirrors with a short focal ratio, fast, in optical terms, allowing them to fit in a smaller dome and thereby reducing the cost. Angell makes mirrors in a rotating oven under the football stadium at the University of Arizona. Once a year, when the stands are empty and the cheerleaders are elsewhere, honing their routines for a new season, the giant oven starts turning. As the temperature climbs past 1,000 degrees Celsius, chunks of borosilicate reach their melting point and flow into a parabolic form. The oven spins like a crazed carousel, lights flashing and giving off singeing waves of heat. When it has thoroughly cooled, a month later, the lid will be cracked on a new mirror, its front face only an inch thick, and its backplate a hollowed-out honeycomb. When Angell cast a 6.5-meter mirror for the Multiple Mirror Telescope in 1992, it was the largest mirror made in the United States since the mirror for the mighty Palomar reflector 50 years earlier. There are several approaches to designing large telescopes. One approach is to align hexagonal segments using lasers and a neural network. This is the approach taken at the Keck Observatory. Another approach is to create lightweight mirrors that fold like pancakes and utilize hundreds of actuators to maintain their proper shape constantly. That's the approach taken by an international consortium with the twin 8.1-meter Gemini telescopes, by the European Southern Observatory with its 4 8.2-meter Very Large Telescopes, VLT, and by the Japanese with their 8.3-meter Subaru telescope. Is it a coincidence that Roger Angell reached heights of up to 8.4 meters for his most recent series of giant mirrors? He looks a little sheepish as he says, "There's been something of a pissing contest going on." Angell is soft-spoken and has a shy smile, but the competitive juices run deep in this expatriate Brit. He has an entrepreneur spirit and relishes going toe-to-toe with the well-heeled governments of Europe and Japan. Although close to retirement age, he's embarked on his most ambitious venture ever, spin-casting 7 8.4-meter mirrors to combine into a 21.4-meter Leviathan in Chile. It will be the world's most considerable scope by far, and the 6 off-axis petals in the design are incredibly challenging to figure out. Even this is a sideshow for Angell, who has had encouragement from the National Academy of Sciences for a plan to mitigate global warming by launching an armada of sun-deflecting mirrors to a location between the Earth and the Moon. The mirrors that emerge from the football stadium are exquisite. After spinning and cooling in the oven, they move over to the grinding and polishing machine. When Angell delivers a mirror, it's big enough to park 5 SUVs on, yet The surface is smooth within 1/5 of a wavelength of light. Scaled up to the size of the continental United States, its most significant bumps would be an inch high. A large glass is the primary component required for detecting Earth. The second method involves circumventing the atmosphere. Nick Wolf, a colleague of Roger Angell, has conducted groundbreaking research on strategies to swiftly modify mirrors to counteract the chaotic light waves that enter a telescope, significantly enhancing image clarity. The technique is referred to as adaptive optics. Wolf is tall, slender, and angular, with white hair protruding from the crown of his head resembling a brush. He radiates remarkable intelligence coupled with a frequently astonished demeanor. Major observatories globally are investing millions of dollars in adaptive optics as engineers endeavor to enhance the performance of their telescopes. The cutting-edge technique involves directing a laser at the atmospheric layer responsible for image distortion and subsequently utilizing the reflected light to recalibrate telescope optics 20 to 30 times per second. The final component is a device capable of producing clear stellar photographs, facilitating the identification of exceedingly faint exoplanets in their vicinity. Phil Hinz observes the disarray of electronic components in his laboratory with composure. Hinz is the protege of Angell and Wolf at the University of Arizona and remains in his 30s. He is slender, with sandy brown hair, and has a voice that is reminiscent of a whisper. The polished apparatus will shortly transform into a nulling interferometer. For the majority, the sheer contemplation of organizing this disorder into a seamlessly operating mechanism would be intimidating. Hinz has been disassembling and reassembling objects since childhood. He is an exceptional astronomer capable of mastering the intricate hardware of contemporary astronomy instruments, including servos, high-speed electronics, and precision optics. Hinz intends to utilize it for the examination of worlds analogous to ours. Thus, he possesses several strategies at his disposal. The initial system is an adaptive optics configuration on the new Large Binocular Telescope, LBT, located in southern Arizona. The telescope features dual 8.4-meter mirrors on a conventional mount, rendering it the most powerful in the world. Atmospheric adjustment is accomplished using a finely crafted secondary mirror, measuring 1 meter in diameter and merely 1 millimeter in thickness. A factor of 1,000 amplifies the disparity between the planet and the star. Following this exertion, the dime-sized star in our previous comparison diminishes to the dimensions of a little bead, thereby allowing the planet to escape its radiance. The 100-watt star is obscured, and astronomers search for the 0.0001-watt planet. It is arduous, yet feasible. Exoplanet discovery is arduous labor, however, Hinz remains resolute. He is aware that the Doppler teams labored for over a decade before achieving their initial accomplishment. The reward is substantial. The isolation of the planet's light, combined with the light-collecting capability of a giant telescope, enables the faint light to be dispersed into a spectrum. Primitive life may be indicated by biomarkers such as oxygen and ozone, or the chlorophyll spectral edge typical of terrestrial plants. Astronomers are meticulously modeling the spectra of Earth-like planets in anticipation of forthcoming data. This intriguing project has the potential to significantly elevate astrobiology, possibly serving as the inaugural demonstration that we inhabit a biological cosmos. The forthcoming advancement in our comprehension of far planets is expected to occur in space. Detecting planets is facilitated by the clarity above our atmospheric distortion. Although we can only deploy relatively small telescopes, this limitation is mitigated by the contrast of stars against a far darker sky backdrop. NASA and the European Space Agency are orchestrating a series of missions to identify and analyze Earth-like planets. These missions are costly, and the launch dates for many remain unknown. Kepler is a 1-meter telescope designed to detect transits of exoplanets. Photometry in space exhibits exceptional stability, enabling the detection of even minute deviations. Kepler is comparatively economical for a space project, with an approximate cost of $200 million. The launch is anticipated for 2008. Kepler will observe a specific region of the sky between Cygnus and Lyra, continually monitoring 100,000 stars for 4 years. If each star possesses a pair of terrestrial planets, Kepler is expected to identify approximately 50 Earth-like planets and over 200 terrestrial planets of varying masses. Corot is a diminutive French mission that is expected to yield fewer outcomes, yet was launched in late 2006. Simultaneously, the Resolute microlensers are securing funds for their project, which aims to examine 200 million stars to identify approximately 100 Earth-like planets. Numerous promising missions exist solely as concepts. They possess limited money for design studies, but lack an increasing allocation in the budgets of NASA or ESA. This will enable the detection of the minute, 1/1,000,000th of an arcsecond, oscillation of a star induced by an orbiting planet. The SIM will investigate Earth-like planets around the closest 250 stars and Neptune-like planets orbiting the nearest 2,000 stars. The sensitivity is astonishing. It could discern details on Lincoln's visage on ascent from the distance of the moon or detect grass sprouting in your lawn from 5 miles away. NASA intends to launch the terrestrial planet finder as the focal point in its search for planets. The design of TPF remains tentative as the pertinent technologies are currently under development. The initial phase will utilize a 6 to 8 meter optical telescope for planetary imaging. A contrast ratio of 1 billion to 1 is achieved with a coronagraph, which obscures light from the star through a central blockage. The TPF coronagraph will focus on the 150 most promising terrestrial planets discovered by SIM, delivering photos and optical spectra of their atmospheric gases. In 5 years, the TPF interferometer, comprising an array of 3 to 4 meter telescopes interconnected by lasers and positioned in a precise configuration, will be introduced. Infrared wavelengths are favored for the interferometer due to the presence of spectral transitions in this region for numerous common compounds, as well as the enhanced visibility of planets over stars at longer wavelengths. It will be capable of characterizing terrestrial planets orbiting approximately 500 nearby stars. The twin TPF missions will incur costs of several $billion each, rendering their launches uncertain. Informed speculation is that NASA will partner with ESA on its Darwin mission, which involves a proposed array of 3 space telescopes operating in formation, similar to the TPF interferometer. In addition to TPF, there exists an ambitious initiative known as Life Finder, designed to possess the sensitivity and resolution necessary to observe oceans and continents on other planets. However, the crystal ball is obscured. Any of these forthcoming missions may be annulled owing to financial constraints within NASA. The space agency competes for a portion of the shrinking discretionary budget segment, contending with Veterans Affairs and Social Security in the complex and challenging budgetary process. Moon, Mars, and beyond is the dominant force that jeopardizes the viability of lesser missions. Astronomers aspire to the objective of discovering Earth-like planets to connect with the public and lawmakers. The scientists who devote their careers to these missions occasionally allow their emotions to overwhelm them. Ultimately, even their ideal hardware may fail to substantiate the existence of life on a remote planet. The missions will seek indicators of life, biomarkers, utilizing tracers such as oxygen, ozone, methane, carbon dioxide, ammonia, and nitrous oxide. Nevertheless, terrestrial life engages in a multifaceted interaction with the planet's surface and atmosphere. Given that other living worlds may differ from our own, It is imperative to conduct meticulous simulations and employ a comprehensive array of diagnostics due to the significant possibility of false positives. The initial observations will not resemble the refined Earth spectrum. Instead, they will present as noisy, erratic traces that may intrigue as much as they elucidate. Scientific exploration at the frontier consistently manifests in this manner. The pace of advancement is exceedingly swift, and astrobiologists continue to refine their expertise. The expedition is merely commencing. Planetary researchers Deborah Fisher and Greg Laughlin are frustrated with gradual reasoning. They are unwilling to wait decades for the cultivation of distant Earths. They seek to identify the closest Earth clone and examine it closely. They draw inspiration from NASA Administrator Dan Goldin's conjecture in 1992 before the discovery of any exoplanets. Envision if spectroscopic analysis unveiled a blue planet with an oxygen atmosphere merely 4 light-years distant, orbiting Alpha Centauri. The demand for constructing a warp drive would commence immediately. Alpha Centauri is the nearest star to the Sun, located 4.4 light-years away, and is one of the most promising locations for the search for extraterrestrial life. Alpha Centauri constitutes a trinary system. Component C is an unremarkable red dwarf, whereas Component B is marginally cooler and dimmer than the Sun, and Component A is nearly a duplicate of the Sun. A and B orbit one another with a minimum distance of 11 astronomical units, and models indicate that this will not disturb the orbits of any planets located within 2 astronomical units of either star. Encouraged by the belief that terrestrial planets are prevalent, Fisher and Laughlin intend to utilize a specialized telescope to observe A and B nightly for 2 years. The Doppler detection method reaches its limits around the mass of Uranus or Neptune. Nonetheless, aggregating 300,000 measurements of 2 luminous stars would enable the filtration of extraneous noise. If any star possessed a Mercury, Venus, Earth, or Mars, it would be able to detect it. This constitutes the first portion. Phase 2 entails dispatching a fleet of nanobots to Alpha Centauri, propelled by small antimatter engines. Consider cell phones operating at 1/10 the speed of light. A substantial quantity would reduce unit costs and guarantee redundancy. Utilizing rudimentary guiding systems, the nanobots would navigate towards terrestrial planets and transmit images and more data. However, without high-powered transmitters, how would they communicate the information over such a significant distance? Fisher and Laughlin have addressed that matter. Sequential waves of nanobots would be deployed. The primary wave would transmit its data a short distance to the subsequent one deployed, like a fireman's bucket brigade. Within 2 generations, we will possess comprehensive data on potentially habitable Earth-like planets. Subsequently, how could we decline a visit? The revelation of numerous remote planets is exhilarating. However, our information remains rudimentary and incomplete. In scientific inquiry, the most compelling evidence is empirical evidence. The age of the solar system is determined from meteorites that have fallen to Earth and lunar rocks retrieved from the Moon, both of which have undergone radioactive decay analysis. While scientists have acquired substantial knowledge from Martian meteorites that have fallen to Earth, definitive evidence of past life on Mars necessitates a mission to the planet to retrieve samples. The exoplanet's allure, however, is indirect. Why can we not travel there? In his youth, Galileo theorized about the velocity of light. One evening, he and a companion stood on hilltops 1 mile apart in the drab, undulating Tuscan countryside. Each possessed a lantern equipped with a sliding shutter. By their prior arrangement, Galileo opened his shutter, and his companion opened his upon observing Galileo's light. Galileo subsequently attempted to quantify the duration required for light to complete a round trip between the 2 hilltops. He was unable to. It occurred so rapidly that he was calculating the total of the 2 reaction times. Galileo approximated that light must go at least tens of thousands of miles per hour. To his knowledge, the velocity may be infinite. The initial precise measurement was conducted by the English astronomer James Bradley in 1728. He recognized that the light from a star above must reach him at a slight angle due to the Earth's orbital motion. The change is minimal, merely 1/200th of a degree, but his observation resulted in a measurement of 300,000 kilometers per second, or 186,000 miles per second. We may now engage in photon manipulation utilizing ultra-fast electronics. The most accurate contemporary measurement is 299,792,458 meters per second. Let us return to the Earth like a walnut. The analogy is beneficial as it decreases both distance and velocity. In this scale model, light travels at pedestrian velocity. Traversing the yard to the pea-sized moon would require around 1 second, corresponding to the light travel time to the moon. The 10-foot sun is a quarter mile from Earth, requiring an 8-minute leisurely walk. Walking to the periphery of the solar system would require 5 hours. We then confront a profound emptiness. Several years of metaphorical travel to reach the nearest star, and 10,000 years to cross the Milky Way galaxy. Let us now contextualize the accomplishments of spaceflight. Voyager 1, launched in 1977, is the most distant spacecraft, currently located 14 billion kilometers away, which is 3 times the distance to Pluto. That is commendable. However, it is merely 0.01% of the distance to proximate stars, hence requiring 300,000 years to arrive at them. The fastest spacecraft is the solar probe Helios 1, which attained a velocity of 160,000 miles per hour in 1974. That is relatively rapid, yet it is merely 0.02% of the speed of light. What prevents us from achieving greater success? There exists a social explanation and a physical explanation. The competition among nations has catalyzed considerable progress in space exploration. The initial chemical rockets were employed by the Chinese military a millennium ago. Consider massive directed pyrotechnics. Robert Goddard launched the inaugural liquid chemical rocket in 1926, followed by Wernher von Braun's substantial advancement with the V-2 rocket during World War II. Goddard became captivated at an early stage. In his youth, he drew inspiration from H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds, and he was almost expelled from college for launching a rocket into the basement of his physics building. Goddard endured considerable professional mockery, yet by 1920, he had formulated a concept for launching a rocket to the moon. Von Braun's Phi 2 arrived too late to influence the war's result. However, his whole team was relocated from Germany to initiate the American space program. NASA was established in response to the Soviet Union's launch of Sputnik in 1957. Before the current surge in telecommunications satellites, the majority of space launches were conducted for military and reconnaissance purposes. NASA has not encountered substantial competition to maintain its efficiency and innovation, while the well-financed military lacks motivation to enhance rocket technology. The underlying cause of our unsatisfactory performance is dependence on chemical energy. Envision a 1-ton automobile requiring 9 tons of fuel to traverse the nation. Moreover, your engine is so inefficient that it consumes all the fuel within a few miles of your residence. This is today's rocket. Les Johnson, manager of NASA's Transportation Technology Program, expresses concern that chemical rockets are excessively slow. They ignite their propellant at the onset of a flight, and the spacecraft subsequently coasts for the remainder of the journey. Sending individuals to Mars will occur sluggishly and inefficiently, with 90% of the mission's mass utilized as fuel. Rockets expel mass to generate thrust. The momentum of the fuel expelled rearward at high velocity through a nozzle is counterbalanced by the forward motion of the payload. This elucidates the enigma of a rocket, its necessity to exert no force against any medium when in the vacuum of outer space. Chemical rockets are controlled detonations. We can see the spirit of the adolescent von Braun encouraging us with delight. Every component of the US and Soviet space programs, including Mercury, the colossal Saturn V, and the Space Shuttle, has utilized either solid or liquid chemical propellant. The destruction of 2 space shuttles has revealed that chemical rockets are highly perilous. There should be more effective and secure alternatives. NASA is researching ion engines that expel an inert gas, such as xenon, at velocities of 100,000 miles per hour from the exhaust, utilizing solar panels or fission for power. Preferably, one should not transport fuel at all, but rather subsist off the land. Solar sails capture sunlight and utilize the momentum, equivalent to the weight of a coin per square meter of surface at Earth's distance, to progressively accelerate across space. Plasma sails are associated with solar sails. They generate a magnetic bubble surrounding the spacecraft, allowing charged particles from the solar wind to propel the vehicle away from the sun. Although NASA has faced challenges in advancing beyond chemical rockets, innovators remain committed to exploring future possibilities. Robert Forward was a preeminent visionary in the field of space travel. The aptly called Forward, who passed away in 2002, resided at the intersection of what was achievable and what could potentially be accomplished in space. A physicist with 200 published research papers, he also authored 11 classic science fiction novels renowned for their innovative application of speculative science. His literature features planets in close orbit, sharing an atmosphere, life on a neutron star, and a metabolism functioning at absolute zero. Forward was a prominent presence in physics colloquia nationwide, characterized by his distinctive white hair, owlish spectacles, and vibrant waistcoats. He utilized skeptical audiences to refine his concepts. Forward was recognized for his contributions to space tethers and solar sails. A space tether is a high tensile strength wire that links 2 objects in distinct orbits. It can produce energy through its contact with the Earth's magnetic field, or function as a whip to propel cargo towards the Moon or another planet. Engineers have devised a network of interlinked tethers capable of transporting a spacecraft to Mars without the need for propellant. Solar sails require no fuel, yet their efficacy diminishes as they go farther from the sun's illumination. Interstellar flight necessitates a sail equivalent to 10 football fields targeted by a colossal laser. 4 centuries ago, Kepler envisioned solar sails after observing comet tails propelled by the solar wind. The technology is finally aligning with the vision. Sails may now be constructed from carbon fiber mesh that is 100 times thinner than a sheet of paper, covered with a layer of aluminium dust. A laser on board would supply the propulsion. Forward additionally suggested a variant wherein a microwave transmitter exerts force on a lattice of superconducting wires. Achieving 1/10 the speed of light with a prolonged, consistent force, and reaching the nearest stars within 40 to 50 years would necessitate a trillion-watt laser or transmitter. Monsters of this magnitude are utilized to induce fusion in the laboratory, albeit for mere fractions of a second. They must be significantly downsized to function in space. Another method to reach the stars is to utilize particle power. All chemical energy, encompassing the well-known activities of life, originates from the rearrangement of electrons among atoms and molecules. The atomic nucleus is influenced by a force trillions of times more potent than that which governs electrons. Generating energy through the rearrangement of nuclear nuclei in fusion or fission is 10 million times more efficient than chemical energy. Rather than utilizing a 10-story Saturn V rocket laden with chemical fuel, Apollo might have achieved lunar travel with a uranium mass equivalent to that of a baseball. The concept of nuclear-powered rockets originated from Project Orion and Project Daedalus, both proposed over 50 years ago. Project Orion was the inaugural engineering design study of a spacecraft propelled by nuclear pulses. A multitude of distinguished scientists and engineers collaborated on it during the 1960s. Nevertheless, it was discontinued due to apprehensions regarding radioactive fallout and the enactment of the 1963 Test Ban Treaty. Project Daedalus was an investigation undertaken by the British Interplanetary Society from 1973 to 1978 to conceptualize a fusion-powered, uncrewed spacecraft for a journey to Barnard's star. The project remained stagnant at the design phase. Regrettably, the apparatus required for fusion control possesses a far greater weight than the fuel itself. Any feasible design for interstellar travel would necessitate a supertanker of fuel to transport a shuttle-sized cargo to the nearest star within 50 years. The interstellar medium lacks sufficient hydrogen to acquire this quantity of fuel en route. Fusion and fission transform approximately 0.1% of the particle's mass into pure energy. Nonetheless, when matter annihilates its quantum counterpart, antimatter, the process is entirely efficient. 19. The mass energy contained in the ink of the period after this sentence may provide energy for your home for several days if liberated. Antimatter is not a concept of science fiction. It is frequently, albeit momentarily, produced in particle accelerators globally as the counterpart to the matter that composes our existence. What is the status of warp drive technology? To the dismay of Star Trek enthusiasts, the speed of light constitutes an immutable limit according to presently established physical laws. 20 wormholes may appear appealing for instantaneous traversal through space-time. Nevertheless, there is no evidence supporting their existence. Sure, scientists aspire to eventually harness the vacuum energy responsible for the universe's acceleration. Some conjecture regarding an anti-gravity apparatus. Notably, there exists no theoretical impediment to teleportation, defined as the remote assembly of an object, atom by atom, after the transmission of information at light speed. Elementary forms of teleportation are utilized in quantum computing. Nonetheless, it is a significant technological advancement to transmit and rebuild a macroscopic item or a human entity. Simultaneously, the visionaries are propelled by an uncontainable and contagious optimism. Each year, new concepts emerge for hybrid combinations of fusion and solar sails, as well as hybrids of fusion and antimatter. In 2005, a modified Russian ICBM propelled a solar sail financed by the Planetary Society and Cosmos Studios. The rocket malfunctioned, yet it exemplified an exciting transformation of weapons into agricultural tools, and the teams will make another attempt. The concepts proposed by Robert Forward are now undergoing evaluation. Robert Frisby aptly describes interplanetary travel as a stretch objective. The JPL flight engineer observes, when it was initially proposed, Apollo was technically unfeasible. Numerous technological components were being developed, including enormous rockets, fuel cells, life support systems, and heat shields. A stretch goal enables individuals to focus their efforts, overcome their limitations, and seize new opportunities. He further emphasizes, do not undervalue the influence of aspirations. If interstellar travel remains an elusive aspiration and NASA persists in utilizing antiquated technologies, we may retreat from the endeavor of space exploration. Ultimately, we face numerous issues domestically. Humans have not exited Earth's orbit since 1972. Is there a future for us in space? Space exploration will perpetually remain challenging and costly. The environment is utterly relentless, presenting perpetual dangers from ultraviolet radiation, cosmic rays, and micrometeorites. Electrical power and data bandwidth are constrained. Regardless of the extent of redundancy incorporated, failures will occur, such as a solar panel that fails to deploy, a battery that malfunctions, or a shutter that remains partially open. Approximately 20% of missions are unsuccessful. This concern results in most NASA engineers having hardly sufficient hair for an inadequate comb-over. However, space exploration is evolving. During the 1970s and 1980s, NASA engineered spaceships akin to premium Swiss Army knives. Planetary missions, such as Voyager and Cassini, as well as space observatories like Hubble and Chandra, were equipped with sophisticated instruments. Considering the duration necessary for development, ground testing, and integration, it was nearly certain that a significant portion of the hardware would be outdated by the time of launch. Your smartphone or pocket PC may possess a faster processor and greater memory than the onboard computer controlling the Hubble Space Telescope. During the 1990s, constrained funds compelled NASA to evaluate the advantages and disadvantages of prominent billion-dollar missions. To diversify investments and maximize taxpayer value, smaller mission classes were established, each with a singular objective and instrument. They possess lively names such as Scout and Explorer. This technique offers benefits, but it forfeits the appeal of large stakes and shared adventure, where each journey resembles a Mayflower embarking on a new planet. Lean missions are cost-effective. Approximately a decade ago, the average cost of a planetary expedition fell below that of the typical Hollywood film. It is widely acknowledged that over 1 in 5 films is subpar. It is now feasible to integrate sensors, a microscopic CCD camera, a processor, a motor, and a radio transmitter into a package the dimensions of a bumblebee. These aerial nanobots might be remotely commanded to transmit their data back to a central hub. The military will employ smart motes to detect chemical weapons on the battlefield. Geologists intend to utilize them for investigating remote and inhospitable regions. And undoubtedly, government agencies will deploy them, and may already be employing them, for surveillance purposes. The miniaturization of technology and the biennial doubling of computational capacity enable the integration of substantial intelligence into a compact form. What might a voyage to Mars or Titan entail, utilizing advanced technology? A decade from now? The spaceship measures the dimensions of a suitcase and is priced at several $100 million. It comprises a collection of pods, each comparable in size to a grapefruit. Pods are deployed from orbit at various sites, and during descent, each pod disperses several motes. The airborne particles analyze pressure, temperature, and chemical composition as air currents carry them. Upon landing, the pods release hundreds more motes. Some traverse the surface, akin to robotic ants, while others excavate beneath the surface to examine for bacteria. Their data is transmitted wirelessly to the nearest pod, which relays it to the spacecraft, which subsequently transmits it to Earth. A neural network connects the motes, and strategy is adjusted in real time. The loss or malfunction of certain motes does not impede the mission's success. Alongside micro-machines, spaceships will transform due to the use of innovative materials. Carbon nanotubes possess a tensile strength 100 times greater than that of steel, while weighing only 1/6 as much. The exterior of a spacecraft could possess self-healing properties against meteorite hits if constructed from long-chain polymers known as ionomers. Current research lab materials enable spacecraft structures to integrate sensors and power generation, thereby obviating the necessity for wires and batteries. Other novel materials can self-assemble and retain their structure, endowing them with versatile functionality and the potential to supplant actuators. Robots are currently capable of performing tasks on our behalf within the solar system and beyond. Commercial jets may already be operated by autopilot, and frequently are. The pilot serves merely as a placeholder. Combat is perilous. So, the military is progressively turning to robots to undertake hazardous tasks. We employ robots to investigate mines, volcanoes, hazardous waste sites, and other locations that pose risks to human safety. Both airlines and the military utilize simulators extensively for training purposes and cost reduction. Space exploration, exemplified by the Mars rovers, increasingly resembles a video game. We will utilize robots as extensions of our being to perceive, hear, and tactily experience realms we shall never explore. The prospect of robots traversing the solar system inspires engineers and technologists, yet it fails to resonate with the general populace. Where is the excitement? Where is the romance? Humans are substantial and unwieldy, yet some of our most remarkable achievements in space have arisen from the synergy of human ingenuity and technological assistance, exemplified by shuttle astronauts rectifying the Hubble Space Telescope's aberration, or Neil Armstrong assuming manual control of Apollo 11 following a computer malfunction, successfully landing on perilous rocky terrain with merely 17 seconds of fuel remaining. Pinky Nelson is among the exclusive group of individuals who have seen the Earth from above. Currently an astronomer and professor at the University of Washington, he completed 3 space shuttle missions in the 1980s, accumulating over 400 hours of flight time in orbit. His actual name is George. As an astronaut, it is okay to be referred to as Pinky. Pinky is 56 years old. However, his visage is smooth and devoid of lines, bordered by sandy hair. He remains essentially unchanged from the enthusiastic young man depicted in a NASA promotional photograph, wearing a gleaming spacesuit and grasping his helmet, with an American flag positioned in the background. Originating from the expansive Iowa Corn Belt, he has had a distinctive opportunity to reflect on the enormity of space. When inquired about the experience above, Pinky responds, "I shall provide my standard reply," and proceeds to do so. Despite numerous retellings that have molded the narrative into recognizable patterns, his eyes continue to glisten when he recounts the incident. It is not solely comprised of checklists and experiments, he asserts. There exists ample opportunity to relax and gaze out the window. Despite the expertise of scientists, Pinky consulted seasoned astronauts and compiled a checklist of methods to relax and derive enjoyment. His pinnacle in space was his inaugural flight aboard the doomed Challenger in 1984. Pinky and the team restored the Solar Maximum satellite, and Pinky filmed video for an IMAX production. He was the inaugural American to navigate freely in space, having conducted 2 extravehicular operations to evaluate the manned maneuvering unit. During a trip with 5 test pilots, Pinky presumed that one of them would be selected to operate the MMU. However, he received approval and subsequently indulged in some playful mocking as he glided by the shuttle while the pilots remained confined within. Pinky's expression brightens as he reminisces about his MMU flight. Even after 22 years, he can still re-engage with the fundamental feeling of space. He is merely 200 miles vertically, a distance that might be traversed by car in a few hours, yet it represents an entirely distinct realm. He stands on a small platform, rocket pack affixed to his back. Earth looms beneath him. The shuttle hovers above him. Stars twinkle at the tips of his extended arms. This little assemblage of flesh, bone, and cartilage traverses a vacuum while rotating at 17,000 miles per hour. Merely 1,000 generations after his forebears endured brief existences on the African veldt, Pinky has become a giant who traverses the globe in 90 minutes. He is solitary with his aspirations and his heart. If gravity diminished its hold even marginally, he would be propelled halfway to the stars. Astronauts have undergone a unique experience. For the majority, space resembles music to an individual who is deaf or hard of hearing. It can be cognitively acknowledged, but not comprehended. The multitude of requirements on Earth renders technology and exploration insufficient to justify the cost of interplanetary travel. If space represents our future and destiny, then the endeavor must involve many more individuals than it does now. A justification for our presence is required. The rationale may be leisure. As commercial spaceflight begins its initial phases, tourism serves as a crucial impetus for this emerging venture. By the conclusion of 2006, 3 male business people and 1 female entrepreneur had each invested $20 million for a journey on a Russian rocket to the International Space Station. The cost for a week-long vacation in a confined space with fewer amenities than a youth hostel is substantial. Nonetheless, it is 4 times less expensive than the per-person expense associated with a space shuttle mission. If you can afford a price of $35 million, they will furthermore include a spacewalk. In 2004, the slender Spaceship One ascended over the Mojave Desert to secure the $10 million X Prize, awarded for the inaugural reusable civilian spaceship to attain the suborbital threshold of 100 kilometers. This accomplishment facilitates opportunities for all. NASA cannot deploy a cargo into Earth orbit for less $10,000 per kilogram. Shortly after the X Prize was conferred, Virgin Galactic declared its intention to utilize a successor to Spaceship One to transport thousands of individuals into orbit by 2010 at an estimated cost of $200,000 per person. When the price decreases by an additional factor of $3,000 to $1,000 per kilogram, commercial opportunities will significantly increase. Bigelow Aerospace is allocating over $1 billion towards the development of a lunar cruise ship. The Shimizu Corporation intends to establish an orbital hotel by 2020. The United States and Russia will not monopolize space exploration in the next 50 years, as they did in the previous 50. European and Japanese entities have ambitious initiatives, and China is poised to leverage space and lunar exploration to solidify its emergence as the world's next superpower. The contemporary pioneers of space include pragmatic business people such as Sir Richard Branson, who engages in high-altitude balloon flights and has established a record company that signed bands like the Sex Pistols, before launching a music store chain and an airline. The financial backing for Spaceship One was provided by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen, who has also funded the pursuit of alien intelligence. Burt Rutan is the preeminent figure in aviation and the coming space age. Similar to his idol, Wernher von Braun, he commenced constructing rockets during his childhood. The items we created were perilous, and the children who interacted with them often lacked fingers and occasionally suffered from blindness in one eye. He states, Rutan and his brother established a facility in the Mojave Desert, where their composite materials and canard wings have revolutionized the manufacturing of light aircraft. In 1986, his Voyager became the inaugural aircraft to round the globe without refueling, accomplishing the task in 9 days. He shattered this record, reducing it to 3 days in 2003. However, throughout the entire process, space was the ultimate reward. Rutan drew inspiration from a 1950s film in which von Braun envisioned traveling to the far side of the moon. That was significant because the entire world shared a sense of adventure 500 years ago when Magellan circumnavigated the globe, he states. Rutan saw NASA's stagnation in the 1980s and became convinced of its inability to provide affordable space flight. He earnestly wants to ascend personally, hence he took action. Rutan engineered Spaceship One for $20 million. Consider the potential impact of his imaginative concepts if funded by NASA's billions of dollars. Individuals such as Rutan contend that humans will eventually inhabit and conduct our occupations in space. Let us hope the cause is not the degradation of the ecosystem, but rather that the Earth is insufficiently vast to accommodate all human aspirations and desires. Recall the swift trajectory of technology. Initially, automobiles were a costly novelty, exhibiting less reliability than equines. Only a daring visionary could have envisioned the potential of aeroplanes a century ago, foreseeing streamlined metal vessels transporting millions of individuals daily. Contemporary spaceflight is often seen as unsatisfactory solely because of the vivid creativity of science fiction authors, which has set high expectations. Since the 1960s, fewer than 500 individuals have undergone the exhilaration of spaceflight, predominantly including military test pilots. Regrettably, NASA did not send poets, writers, and filmmakers into orbit to evoke a profound understanding of the experience of transcending Earth's confines. The private sector is expected to dominate the next 50 years. Purists may recoil at the idea of billboards in orbit and zero-gravity brothels. But when humanity begins to engage in recreation in space, other alternatives will arise. While a week of skiing or lounging on the beach suffices as a vacation for many, there will invariably be individuals who seek to conquer an unascended mountain or investigate a cave devoid of tracks. When space travel becomes as commonplace as commercial aviation, we will be prepared to pursue interstellar exploration. The issue pertains to the duration of the voyage. Utilizing feasible technologies, interstellar travel constitutes a multi-generational undertaking. Travelers will need to be in a state of suspended animation. Mark Ayer, from the Advanced Concepts team at the European Space Agency, states, "We are investigating suspended animation to reduce consumables, food and water, for a journey that may last 5 years or more." The spacecraft's mass is crucial as it influences mission operations. Another consideration is the prevention of psychological issues. If individuals are awake, it is essential to engage them. Ayer is addressing travel within the solar system, although concerns persist for journeys to more remote places. The medical impediment may soon be eliminated. In recent years, physicians have attained a 90% success rate in inducing short-term suspended animation in mice and pigs. The mice were administered a gas combination in which hydrogen sulfide, commonly referred to as rotten egg gas, substituted for oxygen. Their metabolic rates decreased by 90%, and their core temperatures plummeted from 37 degrees Celsius to 11 degrees Celsius. Thereafter, they were resuscitated without any adverse effects. The experiments conducted on our proximate mammalian relatives instill optimism that the methodologies will also apply to humans. Will we ever comprehend the scenario? In approximately 40 to 50 years, a group of explorers may embark on journeys to distant planets. If Fisher and Laughlin successfully locate Earth-like planets surrounding Alpha Centauri, why not dispatch Voyagers in conjunction with the nanobots? It is challenging to conceive the courage of an individual prepared to forsake friends and family and be confined. These ships would serve merely as sealed coffins sufficiently dense to shield against cosmic rays, only to confront an extraterrestrial milieu and an unpredictable future light years from home. Death is inevitable for all individuals. These travelers would be utilizing their lives to execute a daring deed, embodying a fundamentally human curiosity. In a manner, they would be returning to their origins, as we are all progeny of the stars.